Tonight we step quietly into a sealed museum room, where one small clay tablet seems to breathe through the dust. It is not golden, not jewelled, not shaped for royal display or easy admiration. It is only baked earth, pressed by a reed stylus, darkened by age, and scarred by broken corners. Yet around such objects, whole worlds have returned from silence. In the 19th century, excavators working across ancient Mesopotamia lifted thousands of clay tablets from buried libraries, temple rooms, and ruined palaces. Scholars at the British Museum and universities such as Oxford, Yale, and Pennsylvania have spent generations reading those marks, one patient sign at a time. Some tablets record grain, some record sheep, some, rather awkwardly for anyone hoping the ancient world was always poetic, record debts, deliveries, and complaints about bad copper. Humanity, as usual, leaves paperwork wherever it goes, but a few tablets reach into older darkness. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the night settles around you, write your location and your local time below. So this quiet journey has many small lamps across the world. You're not asked to believe too quickly. That would be unfair to the clay. You are only invited to listen as the ancient signs open slowly, like a door swollen by river damp. The mystery begins with a question that feels simple, until it becomes enormous. What did the Sumerians imagine existed before humanity? Your mind drifts towards southern Mesopotamia, toward the flat alluvial land where the Tigris and Euphrates carried silt through reeds, marshes, and mud brick settlements. The air is warm and heavy and the scent is river water, animal hides, smoke from dung fuel, and wet clay drying under a wide sky. Somewhere, a scribe bends over a tablet with a sharpened reed. His fingers are dusty, his eyes are tired. His work is ordinary, and yet not ordinary at all. Records confirm that Sumerian writing emerged in southern Mesopotamia more than 5,000 years ago, first serving administration before becoming a vessel for hymns, myths, lore, and memory. That mainstream fact is not a small thing. It means the earliest writers did not only count jars and sheep, they also tried to hold the invisible shape of existence. And existence, in their memory, did not begin with you. It began with depth. It began with water. It began with something older than cities, older than kings, older than the neat human habit of putting borders around land and calling them eternal. The tablet in tonight's story is not a single magical object resting under a dramatic beam of moonlight. Real history is usually less generous and far more interesting. It is a woven thing, pieced from Sumerian and later Mesopotamian compositions, from creation traditions, king lists, temple hymns, and damaged fragments that whisper across centuries. Still, the idea of a lost tablet is useful. It gives your imagination one place to stand. You may picture it lying in a drawer, wrapped in archival paper, carrying a museum number, and waiting with the calm arrogance of old clay. It has survived floods, fire, collapse, conquest, translation, and bored interns. That last danger is not minor. For a moment, it feels as though you are standing beside the case. The glass is cool, the room is dim. Beyond the window, a modern city moves with electric impatience, but inside the case time behaves differently. The tablet does not hurry. It never has. Its lines are small, wedge-shaped, and stubborn. They were made for a world where memory needed hands. The central mystery is not whether Sumerians possessed secret modern science. That claim wanders too far and too quickly, and usually trips over its own sandals. The deeper mystery is more human and more unsettling. Why did one of the earliest literate civilizations preserve stories in which humanity arrives late? Not first, not central from the beginning, late. In those traditions, the world has structure before people appear. Divine beings exist, waters exist, tasks exist, fields need tending, canals need clearing. Temples may have heavenly patterns before earthly bricks. Labour itself seems to wait, like a tool placed on a bench before the worker enters. A small fringe tidbit lingers here, soft as dust. Some modern enthusiasts claim that certain Sumerian myths describe visitors from the sky who engineered human beings for labour. Serious scholars do not accept that as the plain meaning of the texts, yet the popularity of the idea reveals something revealing in itself. Ancient Mesopotamian stories do speak often about gods, work, creation, and service. That mixture is strange enough without dressing it in metal helmets. The clay already has shadows. You lean closer, and the first thought rising from it is not an answer. It is a landscape. A world before human voices. No market sellers call across the lane. No child drops a reed basket in the mud. No priest climbs temple stairs at dawn. No farmer curses an irrigation ditch that has behaved naturally, like an irrigation ditch. There is only the broad breathing of the plain. In the distance, dark water glides through reeds. Birds lift and settle. The sky is enormous, almost too large for the earth beneath it. At night, stars burn with a cold patience over the marshes, and the constellations seem not decorative, but administrative, and someone, or something, has marked the heavens with order. Here the open scholarly debate begins to murmur. Researchers at major institutions disagree over how literally ancient audiences understood these cosmic stories. Were they sacred history, ritual poetry, theological speculation, and political metaphor, or all of these at once? The careful answer is inconvenient, which means it is probably useful. We do not know completely, but we can listen. The ancient scribe does not write like a modern historian. He does not pause to define categories for your comfort. He belongs to a world where temple, economy, cosmos, and daily survival are bound together. If the canal fails, the city suffers. If the god withdraws favour, the harvest trembles. If the king misrules, order cracks. There is no clean line between mud and heaven. So when the tablet hints at a world before humanity, it is not merely speaking about empty space, it is speaking about a system waiting to become visible. The world is not blank, it is charged. It has pressure behind it. It has layers, duties, powers, and names not yet given to human mouths. The silence feels arranged. You may notice how unsettling that is. Modern people often prefer beginnings that flatter us. We like the curtain to rise just as we enter. The Sumerian imagination is not so polite. It lets you arrive in the whole middle of a much older drama, barefoot, confused, and probably assigned a task. There is gentle comedy in that. There is also a chill. The tablet does not say, "Welcome, human being." All this was made only for you. It seems to say the work was already underway and the order was already ancient. The waters had already moved. The powers had already taken their places. Then, only then. Something like humanity was shaped from clay, breath, purpose, and necessity. Outside the museum room, the world continues in its ordinary glow. Elevators hum, shoes tap on polished floors. A guard coughs softly near the doorway, yet the object in the glass case pulls your thoughts backward, past empire, past agriculture, past memory's safer edges. You stand before a piece of earth that has remembered hands. Perhaps that is the first hidden truth. Not that the tablet proves a lost civilization before humanity in the simple way a headline might promise. Clay is wiser than headlines. It does not shout. Instead, it preserves the fact that one of humanity's earliest writing cultures imagined existence as older, deeper, and more organized than human life itself. Long before recorded history, they said, there was something in a time no longer remembered, something moved. And now, with the room quiet and the ancient marks waiting, you begin to follow that thought into the dark, where river mud, divine labour, and the first human purpose slowly gather shape. Your mind drifts from the museum glass into the land that made the tablet possible. The room dissolves, and the floor beneath you becomes sun-baked earth. Heat rises slowly from a flat plain, where the horizon trembles like water, although real water waits in darker channels beyond the reeds. The air smells of river mud, crushed straw, sheep wool and smoke. It is not the clean air of mountains. It is thick, useful air, full of work and insects and human breath. You stand in southern Mesopotamia, where the land itself seems unfinished. Here, soil gathers from distant mountains, silt rides the rivers for hundreds of miles, then spreads across the low plain in slow brown gifts. The world is not carved from stone here. It is kneaded. It shifts under flood, dries under heat, cracks under sun, and softens again when water returns. A civilization built in such a place does not trust permanence too easily. That may be why clay matters so much. Stone is rare in this southern country. Timber is not generous. Metal must travel from elsewhere through trade, tribute, and dangerous roads. But clay is everywhere, beneath the foot, under the fingernail, along the canal bank, beside the temple wall. Clay becomes brick. Clay becomes bowl. Clay becomes seal. Clay becomes tablet. It is the humble substance of memory. Records from excavated cities confirm that Sumerian scribes used reed styluses to impress signs into moist clay, creating wedge-shaped writing that modern scholars call cuneiform. Archaeological work supported by institutions such as the University of Pennsylvania, Oxford, and the Oriental Institute in Chicago has shown how deeply writing was tied to administration, temple life, and education. The oldest written signs began with practical matters, but practical matters have a secret doorway. Count enough grain and eventually you begin counting years, offerings, gods, and kings. Humanity does love a receipt. A scribe sits near a courtyard wall, legs folded, tablet resting in one palm. He's not floating in mystical wisdom. He's likely warm, busy, and annoyed by someone nearby asking whether the barley total is correct. His reed stylus presses into the clay with sharp, controlled movements. Each mark is a small act of discipline. The clay must be wet enough to receive the sign, but firm enough not to collapse into mush. The hand must move with habit. The mind must hold sound, number, and tradition together. The work is quiet but not simple. You hear sandals scraping over packed earth. A donkey brays somewhere beyond a wall. A woman lifts a jar from a storage room. Children shout near a canal, then fall silent when an older voice corrects them. From a temple precinct comes the scent of roasted grain and oil. The city breathes in layers, and each layer is recorded in clay. This is how memory becomes heavy. A tablet is not like a page. It has thickness. It has a back, an edge, and sometimes the fingerprint of the person who shaped it. When dried in the sun, it can survive for a while. When accidentally fired by a burning building, it may endure for thousands of years. This is one of the archaeology's quieter ironies. Disaster can become preservation. Flames that destroy a room may harden its records for future readers. The ancient world is occasionally rude that way. For a moment, it feels as though you are walking through a scribal school. The walls are mud brick, the floor dusty, the light yellow and low. Students copy signs under supervision. Some tablets carry exercises, word lists, proverbs, and model texts. They reveal not only grand myth, but learning itself, with all its repetition and little failures. A student presses a sign badly. A teacher corrects it. Somewhere in that exchange, civilization trains its memory to continue. Mainstream research has shown that Mesopotamian scribal education preserved literary compositions across generations, sometimes through carefully copied school tablets. This matters because stories about creation and the time before humanity were not slow. Campfire rumours drifting without form. They were taught, copied, reshaped, and placed within a learned tradition. Yet they were not frozen. No ancient story survives as a perfect statue. It is more like a river channel, recognizable, but altered by every season. A myth may appear in one city with certain divine names, then in another with different emphasis. A hymn may honour a god through local pride. A creation account may shift as power moves between temples, dynasties, and languages. The clay preserves, but it also reveals change. A curious fringe tidbit slips into view here. Some collectors in the modern era have treasured tiny cuneiform tablets as if each one might contain a forbidden cosmic secret. In truth, many of them say things like 2 sheep received or 5 jars of oil delivered. It is wonderfully disappointing. Yet that disappointment is useful, because it reminds you that the ancient sacred world grew out of daily work, not apart from it. The gods had accountants. The tablet's world is therefore not merely mystical, it is economic, agricultural, ritual, and physical. Canals must be cleared because fields need water. Fields must be measured because grain feeds workers. Workers must be organised because temples, palaces, and households depend on labour. Labour must be justified because a society built on effort asks why effort exists at all. And here the old mystery begins to deepen. When Sumerian texts imagine beings before humanity, they often imagine work before humanity. The world is already active, but burdened. Divine powers have roles. Lesser beings may carry loads. The fields and canals do not maintain themselves, which is personally unfair of them, but historically very important. Creation is not described only as beauty appearing from emptiness. It is also described as order forming around necessity. The open scholarly debate is subtle. Researchers continue to discuss how far these myths reflect real social structures in early Mesopotamia. Do stories of divine labour mirror temple economies and human work gangs? Do they express theology, politics, ritual memory, or a mixture of all three? No single answer holds the whole clay object in the hand. You feel the rough edge of that uncertainty. The landscape around you makes the question feel less abstract. In southern Mesopotamia, survival depends on managed water, too little water, and crops fail, too much water, and fields drown, salts rise through the soil, channels clog, boundaries shift. The river is a gift, but not a polite one. It must be negotiated with tools, schedules, authority, and prayer. This is not a soft garden at the beginning of time. It is a demanding plain. The dust touches your lips. Reed leaves whisper beside the water. A labourer lifts a basket of mud, shoulders bent under the weight. A boat slides along a canal, carrying grain, wool, and perhaps tablets sealed in clay envelopes. Each movement belongs to a world where writing grows from need, and need grows from the land. Now imagine that prime-lander without humans. No one cuts the reeds, no one repairs the canal wall, no one stamps a seal into wet clay, no one stores barley in measured rooms. The river still moves, the sun still burns, the mud still waits. In the Sumerian imagination, this waiting does not feel empty, it feels like an unfinished assignment. That is the strange beauty of the clay record. It does not invite you into a beginning made of pure light. It invites you into mud, counting, hunger, heat, ritual, and obligation. From such ordinary pressure, ancient people built extraordinary stories. They looked at the fields, the temples, the aching backs of workers, and the vast silence behind human memory. Then they asked what kind of world needed people. Not wanted them, perhaps. Needed them. The reed stylus presses again. A fresh line appears on the damp surface. The sign is small, but the thought behind it is immense. For human breath filled the city lanes, before names settled on walls and waterways. There was clay beneath the hand of creation. There was labour waiting to be assigned. There was a world whose very substance seemed ready to remember whoever touched it. For a moment, it feels as though every footprint has vanished from the earth. No heel mark presses into damp canal clay. No sandal track crosses the courtyard dust. No child runs between reed huts with a stolen date in one hand. The plain spreads outward in a silence so complete that even silence seems too human a word for it. There are reeds, pools, birds, wind, and the long bronze stare of afternoon light, but there is no one yet to call these things beautiful. This is the tablet's most unsettling suggestion. The world does not begin when you arrive. The ancient imagination allows existence to unfold without human witnesses. Waters gather, mud settles, stars wheel overhead, seasons breathe across the low country, the marshes swell and shrink, alive with insects and fish and pale roots twisting in black soil. The air has weight, and the sky presses down like a vast lid of blue fire. Yet no voice names the sun, no hand lifts a jar of Cusco, no prayer rises from a temple stair. There is only the world, waiting in its own old body. Archaeological research from early southern Mesopotamia confirms that large urban settlements such as Uruk developed slowly through long processes of farming, trade, craft, production, and temple organization. Excavations studied by scholars at major universities have shown that cities did not suddenly appear from a dream. They grew from fields, storage systems, households, shrines, and this repeated discipline of communal work. That fact gives the older myths a strange gravity. When they speak of a time before people, they are not describing empty fantasy alone, yet they are responding to a landscape where civilization always had to be made, repaired, and justified. The marsh wind moves through the reeds. You stand at the edge of a primeval waterrow, imagining a country before villages become cities. The river does not behave like a straight road on a map. It curls, splits, floods, abandons channels, and leaves glittering pools behind. Fish break the surface with quick silver flashes. Birds rise in sudden clouds, their wings beating the air like shaken cloth. Somewhere, a boar moves through the cane, unseen except for the trembling stalks. Nothing explains itself. That is part of the power. A modern mind often wants the beginning to be tidy. First comes nothing, then something, then people, then civilization, and finally a documentary narrator politely makes it all feel planned. Ancient Mesopotamian thought is less tidy than that. It offers a beginning full of forces, relationships, and places not yet arranged for human comfort. The world before people is not simply a blank page, it is a field of pressures. Even the gods, in these traditions, may not begin as distant decorations. They belong to the organization of the universe. Some are linked with sky, earth, fresh water, storm, grain, wisdom, or fertility. They are not always gentle. They are not always cruel. They are powers with responsibilities, appetites, moods, and authority, which, when one thinks about it, is alarmingly close to city management. The old stories often place the human being surprisingly late in the sequence. For humankind, there may be divine assembly, cosmic division, watery depth, and the shaping of duties before the farmer. There is the field before the canal worker. There is the canal before the temple servant. There is the god. The human creature enters the stage already set with obligations. It is a humbling arrangement. Your feet sink slightly into wet mud. The sensation is cool beneath the heat. Dragonflies flicker above still water. A smell rises from the marsh, half fertile and half decaying. The scent of life making more life from softened remains. The tablet's broken memory seems to gather from this kind of place. It does not imagine creation as a clean white room. It imagines dampness, mixture, resistance, and emergence. From mud, things come. One mainstream historical fact gives this image firmer ground. The earliest Mesopotamian cities depended on irrigation agriculture, and managing water shaped both social order and political authority. Scholars from institutions such as Yale and Chicago have long emphasized that canals, field systems, and labor organization were central to life in the alluvial South. Such facts do not explain the myths away, they make them richer. A culture that must continually wrestle water into usefulness may naturally imagine creation as the first great act of ordering. Yet there is a quirky fringe tidbit at the edge of this scene. In some modern alternative readings, the pre-human world of Sumer is described as if it were a memory of an actual lost age ruled by non-human intelligences. The claim is not accepted by professional Assyriologists, but it has endured because the texts truly do feel older than ordinary history. They speak from a twilight zone where theology, administration, and cosmic anxiety sit very close together. That is enough mystery for the clay. It does not need a spaceship. The open scholarly debate is more delicate. Specialists continue to ask whether Sumerian creation traditions preserve independent local memories, later theological arrangements, or learned reconstructions made by scribes who inherited older oral material. The question matters because the world before humanity may not be one single belief. It may be many streams joining in the dark. A temple in one city remembers one pattern, a school tablet preserves another. A later copyist changes emphasis without announcing it. The past rarely files its paperwork neatly. You listen to the plane as if it might answer. The reeds scrape against each other with a dry whisper. The water clicks softly around roots. The sun lowers, and the mud flats glow red, then purple, then almost black. A nightbird calls from somewhere beyond sight. For the first time, the absence of humanity does not feel peaceful. It feels immense. Without people, there is no story told around a hearth. But the world itself still has sequence. Flood rises, flood falls, stars appear, stars vanish, seeds drop, roots spread, creatures feed and are fed upon. The old landscape moves by laws that do not require human approval. Perhaps this is why the ancient tablets' pre-human world feels so solemn. It reminds you that reality is not waiting for human understanding before it proceeds. That thought is quiet and slightly cold. The Sumerian imagination gives the pre-human earth a kind of charged loneliness. It is not lifeless, but it is voiceless. It has no scribe to mark the grain measure, no singer to praise the temple, no mourner to name the dead, no king to boast that his wall will last forever. The gods may act, the waters may turn, the deep may conceal its wisdom, but the human witness has not yet been shaped. So what is missing? Not matter, not motion, not divine presence. What is missing is the peculiar creature who names, serves, complains, remembers, and keeps accounts with impressive stubbornness. What is missing is the being who looks at mud and sees a tablet, looks at a floodplain and sees a city, looks at darkness and asks who lived there first. Perhaps the tablet's oldest question is not what existed before humanity. Perhaps it asks why humanity was considered necessary at all. A world of water, reed, sky, and divine power seems complete in one sense, yet unfinished in another. It waits not for beauty, but for burden. It waits not for applause, but for hands. Night settles over the empty plain. Stars appear in slow clusters above the darkening marsh. The air cools. The smell of wet earth grows stronger. You imagine no fires on the horizon, no songs drifting through reed walls, no lamps burning in temple courts, and the world before the first human footprint is not dead. It is awake in another way, older than language, and patient beyond comfort. Somewhere in that patience, creation begins to feel less like a gift and more like an appointment. The clay holds that possibility without explaining it fully. It lets the silence remain wide. It lets the rivers move without names. It lets the sky look down on earth before any human eye looks back. And in that vast, unpeopled hush, the first mystery sharp, slow and dark as a reed shadow at dusk. Humanity has not arrived. But something is preparing a place. In your ears, the reed whisper changes into something colder and more deliberate. It is not thunder. It is not a roar from the heavens. It is the sound of arrangement, the hush of invisible hands placing boundaries where no human boundary stone yet stands. The old tablet's world begins to show its hidden architecture. Before humanity, there are powers that measure, they separate, they assign, They hold the edges of things apart, so sky does not collapse into earth and fresh water does not lose itself in salt darkness. The gods in this older vision do not always arrive like bright statues. They are closer to principles with full face. You sense them in the lifting of the sky, in the firmness of the ground, in the dark undercurrent beneath the marsh. You feel them in the rhythm of flood and drought, in the dangerous kindness of rain, in the terrifying usefulness of sunlight. They are not merely characters in a tale, they are the explanation behind why the world does not melt back into confusion. Ancient Mesopotamian texts often describe divine beings through their offices, domains, and relationships. Scholars at universities such as Oxford, Yale, and Chicago have long studied how these gods reflected both cosmic order and urban society. A deity could be tied to a city, a craft, a natural force, or a royal function. This mainstream fact matters because the Sumerian divine world is not a loose crowd of magical personalities. It is a structured society above and within the human one. A divine city stands behind the earthly city. That thought settles slowly. The sky god is not just sky. The earth goddess is not just soil. The lord of fresh waters is not only a spring or underground stream. These powers possess rank, memory, and responsibility. Their world has councils, messengers with decisions and disputes. When humans later appear, they do not enter a wilderness without administration. They enter a universe that already has a management. Naturally, this raises the ancient question nobody wants during a peaceful evening. Who was doing all the work? The old myths often imagine younger or lesser divine beings carrying burdens before humans exist. They dig, maintain, and endure tasks. This is not a small detail hiding in the corner. It suggests that labour belongs to the cosmos before it belongs to human society. Work is not an accident after creation. Work is one of the reasons creation becomes organised. You may picture a pre-human dawn over a sacred plain. No temple bricks have been set by human hands, yet the pattern of a temple seems to exist in thought. No canal labourers stand knee-deep in mud, yet water already requires channels. The gods look upon the world not as tourists, thankfully, but as rulers responsible for maintaining order. Some would like a holiday. There is the gentle sarcasm of the mythic universe. Even divine beings appear to grow tired of inconvenience. They may command, resent, negotiate, and complain. Their grandeur does not erase their workload. In some later Mesopotamian traditions, divine labour and divine dissatisfaction become part of the movement toward human creation. The cosmos is majestic, yes, but apparently still understaffed. That is oddly comforting. It means the ancient imagination understood exhaustion. A scent of wax smoke seems to drift through the darkness. Perhaps it comes from a temple lamp burning in a later age, where a priest chants names preserved from older compositions. Each name gathers a power. Each power holds a region of existence. Heaven, earth, water, storm, grain, birth, wisdom, underworld, kingship, writing. The list lengthens until the universe resembles a vast household, full of rooms and duties. Records from Mesopotamian god lists confirm that scribes organized divine names with remarkable care. These lists were copied in schools and temples, preserving relationships among gods across centuries. They were not bedtime doodles, although one hopes a sleepy student occasionally thought otherwise. They were intellectual tools, sacred catalogues, and exercises in ordering the invisible. The tablet's hidden timeline deepens here. Before humanity can be assigned a role, the powers themselves must have roles. Before human kingship, divine authority must be imagined. For city walls, cosmic borders must be drawn. Creation is not simply the appearance of matter, it is the classification of existence into a system that can be served, feared, and remembered. The open scholarly debate remains alive in the quiet. Specialists still discuss whether these divine structures developed mainly from city politics, inherited religious traditions, environmental pressures, or scribal attempts to harmonize older local cults. Some emphasize theology, some emphasize social history, some emphasize the long craft of scribal learning. The clay refuses to choose only one. It prefers to keep several doors open. You stand beneath a sky that feels newly measured. Stars are not scattered randomly now. They seem placed, as if each has received a small instruction. The moon rises with calm authority, silvering the edges of marsh water. The earth below darkens into a broad sleeping body. Between them stretches a space where wind moves. Birds cross, and later human prayers will rise. But no human prayer rises yet. In this moment, the gods who measure darkness are not loud, but they do not need to shout. Their authority lies in separation, naming, and proportion. They create distance between above and below. They make directions possible. They turn endless confusion into locations. Without such measuring, a person could not say here, there, sky, ground, river, field, temple, home. Even thought needs edges. The quirky fringe imagination has loved this part of Sumerian material for generations. Some modern writers have treated the divine measurers as evidence of advanced engineers, architects from beyond the earth, or cosmic surveyors with lost instruments. Professional historians are cautious, and rightly so, yet the fascination grows from a real feature of the texts. Ancient Mesopotamian gods often behave as planners, builders, judges, and holders of technical knowledge. They do not merely sparkle, they supervise. That makes the pre-human world feel more unsettling than an empty chaos. It becomes a place of hidden procedures. Something has already counted, something has already divided, something has already decided that the upper realm and lower realm are not the same. You begin to feel that humanity will not be created into freedom first, but into a set of inherited arrangements. The old powers stand in their stations. One governs height, one guards depth, one carries storm, one knows fresh water hidden under the ground, one presides over birth, one watches the dead. Their names may shift across cities and centuries, but their functions reveal a pattern. The world is meaningful because every part belongs to a relationship. A faint chill touches the skin. It is the feeling of being late to a meeting already underway. You imagine a divine assembly before any human language records its proceedings. There are no chairs, no minutes, no bored clerk pretending to pay attention, though the Sumerians would certainly have appreciated the clerk. There is instead a gathering of powers, each bearing an aspect of reality. Their decisions do not affect policy only. Their decisions become weather, fertility, kingship, death, and time. This is where darkness becomes measured. Not destroyed, not denied, measured. The dark remains in the deep water, in the night sky, in the underworld road, in the sealed chamber beneath the temple floor. But it is given borders. It is placed within a larger order. Ancient creation is not always about removing mystery. Sometimes it is about making mystery livable. Perhaps that is why these stories endure. They do not promise that the world is simple. They whisper that the world has structure, even where human eyes cannot see it. They suggest that before people shaped bricks or counted grain, older powers had already marked the spaces into which human life would later unfold. This is not proof of a hidden empire before mankind. It is something subtler and more haunting. It is the memory of a universe already arranged. You look into the measured dark, and the dark does not answer. It only opens into layers. Above you, the stars hold their places. Beneath you, the ground keeps its secrets. Between them, the air waits for voices that have not yet been made. The gods have measured the world. The human being is still absent. Your mind drifts toward water before it has been given a human name. It moves through darkness first, then through bronze light, then through a morning haze that turns the plain into a pale and trembling mirror. No city wall interrupts it. No official marker claims its bank. No field surveyor kneels with cord and peg, arguing softly with another man who is absolutely certain the boundary was different last season. The river bends where it wishes, slow and immense, carrying mountain dust into the lowlands like memory ground into powder. This is a world of rivers before titles. The land is not yet Uruk, not yet Eridu, not yet a patchwork of temple estates, gardens, sheepfolds, and carefully measured fields. It is a spreading body of mud, reed, pool, channel, and sun. Fish slide beneath brown water. Turtles rest on half-submerged logs. White birds stalk the shallows with solemn dignity, as if already aware that future priests may one day envy their posture. The river does not care. It moves because gravity and season command it. Ancient southern Mesopotamia depended on the Tigris and Euphrates river systems, whose shifting channels shaped settlement, agriculture, and political life. Research by archaeologists and environmental historians at institutions such as Chicago, Yale, and Pennsylvania has shown that early communities grew around the demanding management of water. That mainstream fact changes the mood of the old myths. When Sumerian stories speak of primeval waters, they are not imagining decoration. They are remembering the most powerful reality in the landscape. Water gives life, but it also erases. You stand near a bank that is not really a bank yet. It is a soft negotiation between land and water. Your feet sink into silt, and the mud closes gently around your toes. The air smells of wet grass, salt, rotting reeds, and distant heat. A dragonfly hangs motionless, then vanishes sideways as if reality briefly changed its mind. The sun rises higher. The marsh begins to steam. In the old imagination, fresh water has a sacred depth. It is not only what you drink or divert, it comes from beneath, from hidden places under the ground, from a deep reservoir that seems older than rain. Later Mesopotamian texts would speak of the great subterranean waters associated with wisdom, creation, and divine power. The rivers you watch are surface signs of a deeper mystery, visible fingers of an unseen body. That is how the plain teaches theology. Nothing here is separate for long. Mud becomes brick, reed becomes stylus, water becomes barley, barley becomes bread, bread becomes offering, offering becomes relationship, relationship becomes order. The river does not merely pass through civilization, it becomes civilization's pulse, its risk, and sometimes its executioner. A failed flood can starve a city. An excessive flood can ruin fields. A changed channel can turn importance into abandonment with magnificent indifference. This is history with wet feet. You listen as water presses through reeds with a soft clicking sound. Insects sing in the heat. Somewhere, unseen fish disturb the surface. You begin to understand why a culture born here might imagine the beginning not as solid ground, but as watery potential. Before names are spoken, before a ruler claims land, before a temple receives offerings, the river already carries force. A quirky fringe tidbit sometimes surfaces around this idea. Some modern enthusiasts claim that the Sumerians remembered a world ocean from an age before settled life, or even a drowned civilization hidden beneath later flood stories. Scholars are cautious, because mythic water is not a map. Yet ancient Mesopotamian literature truly does give water a powerful and ancient role. It is source, boundary, danger, and depth. The fascination is understandable. Water remembers no straight lines. The open scholarly debate is quieter, but more useful. Researchers continue to discuss how environmental experience shaped Mesopotamian creation traditions. Did floodplain life inspire the image of primeval waters? Did temple theology transform local water management into cosmic order? Did scribes inherit older oral symbols whose original setting is lost? These questions remain active because the texts do not speak in one modern voice. They speak like rivers, several channels, one movement. The old tablet seems to hold this movement in its small clay body. Its signs were made with moisture, then dried into permanence. It is a river object transformed into memory. The scribe could not write without water. The clay had to be softened, the reed had to grow near marsh and canal. Even the act of recording the world before humanity depended on the wet geography that the story remember. That detail feels almost too perfect. Oh, no. The river writes itself through human hands. You walk farther along the imagined bank, where reeds rise higher than your shoulders. Their leaves brush your arms with dry, papery edges. The sound is intimate, like many whispers avoiding a single clear statement. Beyond them, open pools reflect the sky. The water is blue in one place, green-black in another, and gold where sunlight falls directly. A heron steps once, then waits. Before names, there is patience. The Sumerian mind may have felt that patience as divine. A river can be persuaded, but never fully mastered. A canal cuts its path through the moor-thus plain. Yet silt returns. Devis hold for a season, then crack. Men dig, repair, measure, curse, pray, and begin again. This repeated struggle turns water into a teacher of limits. It tells humanity that control is always temporary. The oldest powers understand this. In the pre-human world, rivers flow without petitions, without songs, without offerings poured from bowls. Their movement is not yet part of an agricultural calendar scratched onto clay. No one says the flood is early, no one complains that the channel has shifted again, although one suspects the complaint is waiting patiently in the future. The waters move according to a rhythm beyond human frustration, and still they seem to prepare. The rivers lay down soil, the soil thickens, plants root, animals gather, the plain becomes fertile. But fertility without human labour remains wild abundance. Grain does not become a ration by itself, fish do not become temple offerings by personal ambition. Dates do not climb into storage jars out of civic responsibility. Someone must organise the gift. Here the hidden timeline takes another careful step. The rivers before names are not empty scenery. They are the condition that makes later humanity possible. They create the mud from which bricks will rise, the clay from which tablets will form, the fields that will demand labour, and the surplus that will feed temples and kings. Before humans serve the gods, the rivers serve the possibility of humans. Perhaps that is why the water feels ancient and watchful. It does not speak, yet it contains every future word. You imagine the first names approaching slowly from beyond the horizon. A place will be called a city, a mound will become sacred, a channel will be maintained and disputed, a field will be measured, a harvest will be counted, a god will receive a house, a king will claim the order was always meant to lead toward him, because kings do tend to arrive carrying convenient conclusions. But the river knows better. It was there before the title. The sun lowers across the flat country, turning the water to beaten copper. The reeds darken into long wavering lines. A night breeze rises, carrying the smell of damp earth and flowering plants hidden near the bank. The river continues in the half-light, neither hurried nor still. It belongs to a time deeper than the human calendar. You feel the calm discomfort of that thought. Before humanity, the world is not incomplete in the way a room is incomplete without furniture. It is incomplete in the way a question is incomplete without an answer. The rivers ask nothing aloud, yet their channels seem to shape a future need. Their waters make fields possible, and fields make labour necessary, and labour makes society, story, and devotion almost unavoidable. The old clay memory rests on this watery foundation. Long before recorded history, the rivers move through the unnamed plain. In a time no longer remembered, they carry silt, fish, reeds, silence, and thought the first conditions of purpose. You listen to them in the darkening heat, and their sound is not speech, not yet. It is the breath before language. The sky begins as something too close to the earth. Not physically close in a way that can be measured with a cord, but close in the older, dreamlike sense. Above and below have not yet fully become separate thoughts. The world feels pressed together, like wet clay before the potter lifts his hands. Darkness rests in the folds. Water gathers in hidden places. Air waits to become distance. Then something divides. You feel it not as violence, but as a slow widening. Space opens between the high blue vault and the dark body of the ground. The horizon becomes a line. The upper world takes height. The lower world takes weight. The middle becomes breathable, full of wind, dust, birds, smoke, and later the fragile voices of people. This is the ancient architecture of separation. In Mesopotamian tradition, creation often begins with ordering rather than making from absolute nothing. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford and Yale have long observed that Sumerian and Akkadian texts tend to imagine the cosmos through relations among heaven, earth, waters, and divine authority. This mainstream historical fact matters because the old stories do not always ask where matter came from. They often ask how existence became arranged. Arrangement is everything. Without separation, there is no above. Without above, there is no below. Without the space between them, there is no place for temples to rise, smoke to ascend, birds to cross, or prayers to travel into the unseen. The cosmos must first become a house with rooms. Only then can anything dwell inside it. You stand in that first widening. The air is cool for a moment, as if the new distance has drawn breath. The ground beneath your feet is dark and damp, still remembering the waters that pressed upon it. Overhead, the sky is not yet familiar. It feels freshly lifted, immense and almost listening. A pale moon hangs there like a seal pressed into blue wax. The old tablet does not need to describe this in modern language. It gives fragments, divine names, actions, relationships, and images. It speaks in the grammar of sacred memory. Heaven and earth are not just places, they are powers, ancestors, partners, and boundaries. To divide them is not simple construction, it is the beginning of meaning. Even the wind changes. It now has somewhere to move. A fringe tidbit has often attached itself to this cosmic separation. Some modern readers claim that ancient myths about dividing heaven and earth preserve memories of forgotten astronomical events, perhaps comets, atmospheric upheaval, or a changed sky. Professional scholars are cautious, because myths are not laboratory notes wearing old sandals. Yet it is true that ancient peoples watched the heavens with intense care, and they often connected celestial order with earthly stability. The night sky was not background, it was a document. Ancient Mesopotamian observers tracked the moon, stars, planets, omens, seasons, and ritual timings with remarkable dedication. Later astronomical tablets show a tradition of systematic watching that became one of the great intellectual achievements of the ancient world. This careful attention gives older cosmic stories a special weight. A people who studied the sky so closely could naturally imagine creation as the first establishment of visible order overhead. You look upward, and the stars seem newly assigned. Each point of light stands in the blackness with quiet authority. The sky is no longer a lid pressing on the plain. It is a measured realm. It has paths, patterns, and returning signs. The moon grows and shrinks. Certain stars appear at expected times. Planets wander, but not without personality. The heavens seem strange, but not meaningless. Below, the earth receives its own identity. It is not merely what lies underfoot. It is a real field, mountain, grave, foundation, and womb of clay. It holds seeds. It receives the dead. It supports temples. It resists the flood and then yields to it. Because the earth has always enjoyed making human confidence look temporary. That little lesson never grows old. The separation of sky and earth also creates tension. What belongs above may desire what lies below. What happens below may seek approval from above. Oh, the temple will later stand as a vertical bridge, a raised place where earth reaches upward and heaven is invited downward. The stepped platform, the sacred enclosure, the offering table, the incense smoke, all depend on this first distance. A temple needs separation to be meaningful. If heaven and earth are already one, no stair is needed. Here an open, scholarly debate moves softly through the scene. Researchers continue to discuss whether Mesopotamian cosmic geography should be read mainly through ritual practice. political theology, inherited mythic poetry, or learned scribal classification. Some emphasize the temple as a model of the universe. Others focus on the older poetic images of divine genealogy and separation. The fragments permit several careful paths, but no single path owns the entire landscape. You can feel that uncertainty in the air. It is not a weakness. It is part of the ancient atmosphere. The tablet's broken signs never hand you a neat diagram with labels and polite arrows. Instead, they offer a sense that the world was structured through acts of distinction. This belongs here. That belongs there. This rises. That settles. This shines. That bears weight. Such distinctions create calm. They also create dramatized. Once heaven and earth are divided, the universe becomes layered. Some beings dwell above, some dwell below, some pass between. Humanity, when shaped, will inhabit the middle, that difficult zone between divine command and earthly hunger. People will look upward for meaning and downward for burial. They will plant seeds in the soil and read omens in the sky. Their lives will be stretched between dust and stars. That's a beautiful discomfort. You imagine the first space between heaven and earth widening like a breath held too long and finally released. The horizon clears, the air fills with possibility. Birds find paths through the middle realm. Clouds gather and cross. Rain falls from above into below. Joining what has been divided without erasing the division, the world becomes a living negotiation. A scent rises from the ground, wet mineral and crushed reed. A distant rumble moves through the sky. Perhaps storm, perhaps divine footstep, perhaps just weather being overly dramatic. Light flickers behind a bank of cloud. For a moment, the entire plain seems caught between realms, neither fully of earth nor fully of heaven. This is where ancient thought becomes intimate. Every human body repeats the pattern. Your head lifts toward the sky. Your feet press into earth. Breath moves through the middle. Hunger pulls downward. Hope looks upward. Sleep returns you to darkness. And waking separates you again into form, name, and task. Perhaps the Sumerians saw this too. Perhaps their cosmic division was not only about the universe, it was also about the human condition that had not yet appeared. To be human would mean living in the gap, beneath divine height and above the hidden deep. It would mean carrying messages through offerings, prayers, songs, inscriptions, and labour. It would mean being small, but placed. Small things can be placed carefully. The old record hints at an architecture older than the first city wall. It suggests that before a brick could be laid, the cosmos itself needed a foundation plan. Not a plan in the modern sense, with clean measurements and a foreman sighing at delays, but a sacred structure of regions and relationships. The upper world, the lower world, and the inhabited middle each receive their place in the great arrangement. The darkness does not vanish. It withdraws into depth, night, and distance. It remains necessary, because a universe without hidden places would have no mystery at all. The sky divided from earth leaves shadows under things. It leaves stars visible only when the sun is gone. It leaves the deep beneath the temple, the grave beneath the field, the unseen beneath the visible. Order is not the end of mystery. It is the frame that lets mystery endure. You stand in the newly opened space, listening to wind move where no wind could move before. The plain stretches outward, the heavens rise in silence, the earth steadies itself below. Something has been separated, and because of that separation, everything can begin to have position, distance, longing, and return. Humanity is still unformed, but the room of the world is ready. Your attention settles on a pattern hidden inside the old arrangement of the world. It begins with number, but not the dry number of a merchant tallying wool. This is number as architecture, number as memory, number as a way of making invisible things stand still long enough for the mind to touch them. The ancient tablet seems to breathe through ranks, layers, and repeated forms, as if the universe has been stacked with careful hands. 7 begins to glimmer in the darkness. Not always openly, not always with the neatness a modern reader might prefer. Ancient texts rarely behave like polite diagrams, yet across Mesopotamian tradition, certain numbers return with a slow ceremonial weight. 7 gates, 7 sages, 7 divine powers, 7 days of ritual attention in later traditions, 7 as fullness, danger, completion, girl, and threshold. It is not mathematics alone, it is atmosphere. You feel that atmosphere around you. The world is no longer a single plane beneath a sky. It has levels now. There is the high brightness where divine authority gathers. There is the wide middle where wind, storm, and future human voices will move. There is the ground, dark and fertile. Beneath it, there are waters, foundations, graves, and roads no living foot should hurry along. Around it all, there are boundaries that do not show themselves to the eye. A mainstream historical fact stands quietly beneath this vision. Mesopotamian scribes produced god lists, lexical lists, ritual lists, and cosmological traditions that organized knowledge into ordered sequences. Scholars at universities such as Oxford, Chicago, and Pennsylvania have shown that listing was not a minor habit. It was a major intellectual practice, a way to classify gods, professions, animals, places, signs, and the relationships among them. The ancient mind loved order. It also loved making students memorize it. Somewhere in a scribal school, a young learner copies a list with aching fingers. The room smells of damp clay, sweat, and reed dust. His teacher watches without much mercy, because civilization apparently requires both wisdom and mild educational suffering. One sign follows another. One name follows another. The list grows long, and through repetition, the world becomes arranged inside the student's mind. That is how a cosmos can be copied. The tablet's sevenfold feeling may not be a single doctrine. It may be a cluster of habits, symbols, and structures that later readers gather into one dim shape. Still, the effect is powerful. You begin to imagine a universe built like a layered temple, each level holding its own guardians, duties, and silences. The visible world becomes only the middle surface of a deeper system. Your feet rest on one layer. Your breath moves through another. Your eyes seek a third. The old Sumerian and Mesopotamian world did not separate knowledge into clean, modern compartments. Theology, astronomy, ritual, kingship, farming, and omen reading braided together. A star might be a sign, a temple plan might echo the cosmos, a number might hold ritual force, a myth might explain why work, death, and hierarchy feel older than any one city. This is not confusion, it is another kind of map. The map is not flat. You picture 7 veils hanging in a dark sanctuary. Each veil is woven from a different substance. Reed shadow, river mist, burnt incense, moonlight, brick dust, black water, the breath of sleeping animals. Behind each veil is not an answer, but another ordered region. The ancient world reveals itself by concealment, which is deeply inconvenient and entirely fitting. A quirky fringe tidbit appears at the edge of this pattern. Some modern writers have tried to connect Mesopotamian sevenfold imagery with hidden planetary codes, lost initiations, or secret sciences from a vanished age. Professional scholars warn against forcing scattered symbols into one grand machine, yet the attraction is understandable. When a culture repeats certain numbers around gods, gates, sages, and rituals, the imagination naturally begins tracing lines between them. Some lines are real, some are only candle smoke. The scholarly debate remains open and careful. Researchers continue to ask how numerical symbolism worked in different Mesopotamian periods and genres. Did a number carry stable sacred meaning across centuries, or did its force shift depending on ritual, myth, and scribal context? Did later Babylonian systems reshape older Sumerian patterns? The answer is not a single clean statement. It is layered, like the very cosmos being studied. That layered uncertainty serves the mood of the tablet. Nothing comes to you all at once. The ancient record gives a god here, a gate there, a ritual number somewhere else, and a broken line that might have once held the missing connection. You reconstruct carefully, knowing the structure may never be complete. The task feels like walking through a ruined temple at night, finding one stair, then another, but never the whole staircase. Still, the direction is upward and downward at once. The universe is not only spread across space, it descends, it rises, it surrounds. The gods occupy ranks. Messengers travel, decrees pass from one power to another. Sacred knowledge may be kept above, below, or within the deep. The human realm, still waiting for its full entrance, will be placed within this system, not outside it. That placement matters. If humanity is created in a layered cosmos, then human life is never merely biological. It is administrative, ritual, and symbolic from the beginning. You're not only a creature of dust, you're a worker in a structure, a listener between levels, a fragile keeper of names. You stand where offerings rise and commands descend. You belong to the middle, which is rarely comfortable. Middle places are busy. The night around you seems to thicken. Above, stars appear like small nails fastening dark cloth to the roof of the world. Beneath, the soil feels heavier, as if it is not just ground, but a ceiling for something below. Wind passes over the plain, and the reeds answer in shifting bands of sound. Every natural thing begins to seem assigned to a level. Birds cross the air. Fish move in the water. Roots enter the dark. Later, humans will try to understand all of it with lists, rituals, myths, and, inevitably, arguments. They will place gods in families, stars in patterns, kings in sequences, and cities in sacred histories. They will count reigns so long they become almost dreamlike. They will copy names whose older meanings are already fading. They will try to make time itself behave. Time rarely cooperates. The tablet's pattern of 7, whether clear or only partly glimpsed, suggests a forgotten system being reconstructed from scattered remains. Not a secret code waiting to be solved by one clever sentence. Something slower. A habit of seeing reality as ordered through repetition, rank, and sacred completeness. The world before humanity is not a random wilderness. It is organized enough to have thresholds. A threshold is not a wall. It is an invitation with rules. You stand before those rules without fully knowing them. 7 may mean completion. 7 may mean danger. 7 may mark passage into sacred depth. 7 may simply gather inherited associations into a number that feels ancient because it has been touched by many hands. The clay does not explain itself completely, and that restraint makes it more believable. The system remains half-lit. You sense divine ranks arranged beyond sight, like figures seated in a hall whose doorway is barely open. You sense gates that separate regions of being. You sense duties moving through the unseen world like messages carried at night. Somewhere, a decree is made. Somewhere, a boundary is watched. Somewhere, a name is held in reserve. This is the hidden order before human arrival. It is not loud. It is not simple. It is not a stage built for applause. It is a deep arrangement of powers, numbers, layers, and thresholds, turning slowly beneath the stories that later civilizations will tell about themselves. Humanity has not yet stepped into its assigned place, but the place already has shape. The sevenfold darkness waits, and its silence feels numbered. The hidden order begins to stir with the sound of labour. Not human labour yet. No farmer bends beneath the rising sun. No woman grinds grain at a doorway while a child sleeps nearby. No canal crew stands knee-deep in brown water, arguing about whose turn it is to carry the heavier basket. The world is not yet filled with those familiar human complaints, those small daily music notes of civilization. But work already exists. That is the strange turn. In the ancient imagination, before mankind receives breath and burden, other beings may carry the weight of keeping the world in motion. They are not always described with the clarity a modern reader might demand. They appear through layered traditions, through divine households, through later mythic echoes, through the memory of lesser gods who dig, serve, endure, and grow tired. Their presence suggests something profound. Labour is older than humanity. You stand beside a canal that has not yet been dug by human hands, and still you sense the trench waiting. The ground is stubborn, the air is hot, the water wants direction, but direction requires effort. The plain does not become fertile by admiration alone. Someone must cut channels, raise banks, clear silt, and return when the whole system clogs again, because mud has never respected anyone's schedules. The gods know this, or at least the stories imagine that they do. A mainstream historical fact gives this mythic labour its earthly shadow. Early Mesopotamian civilization depended on large-scale organised work, especially for irrigation, temple building, and agricultural production. Research associated with universities such as Yale, Chicago, and Pennsylvania has shown that labour organisation shaped urban growth in southern Mesopotamia. The myths do not simply float above this reality, they seem to breathe its dust. You hear the scrape of baskets, you hear wet earth slapping into piles, yet the workers are not human. They are divine or semi-divine servants, beings placed below the great powers but above mortal absence. They occupy an uncomfortable middle rank. They are close enough to the gods to belong to the cosmic order, yet low enough to feel strain. Their work is not glorious. It is repetitive, heavy, and necessary. This is where ancient myth becomes almost painfully social. The highest gods command, the lower beings serve. The world continues because someone beneath authority performs the difficult maintenance. A temple audience in ancient Mesopotamia would have understood that pattern immediately. Every city had ranks, every estate had supervisors, workers, dependents, and obligations. Heaven, in these stories, may resemble the city not because the gods are merely imaginary officials, but because human society was the nearest language for cosmic order. A faint scent of sweat and river clay enters the air. The workers before mankind are not given soft beds or poetic leisure. They dig. They lift. They perhaps complain, as all intelligent beings should when assigned too much manual labour. That complaint matters. In several Mesopotamian traditions, divine dissatisfaction with work becomes one of the pressures leading toward human creation. Humans are shaped not as ornaments, but as replacements, helpers, servants, or burden bearers. It is not exactly flattering, but it is unforgettable. You may picture a band of lesser gods at dawn, standing along a half-formed watercourse. Their shoulders ache, their hands are caked in clay. The sky above them belongs to greater powers who issue decrees from a calmer height. The earth beneath them demands attention. The waters require channels, and the fields require preparation. The universe, magnificent as it is, has developed a staffing problem. Creation begins to look like delegation. That is a very ancient sentence. A quirky fringe tidbit lingers nearby. Some modern interpreters have imagined these pre-human workers as memories of an earlier race, a forgotten servant class, or beings replaced by humanity after some lost cosmic dispute. Serious scholars do not treat those claims as historical evidence. Yet the appeal is easy to understand. The myths really do preserve the eerie idea that humans stepped into a role already occupied by others. The job existed first, the worker changed later. This idea unsettles the usual comfort of human uniqueness. It suggests that humanity may not have been created because the universe lacked admiration. The universe may have lacked labour. In such a story, your hands matter before your thoughts, your back before your philosophy, your service before your song. The human being is important, yes, but important as one who carries a task. That is a colder kind of dignity. The open scholarly debate here is rich and careful. Researchers continue to discuss how Mesopotamian myths of divine labour relate to real systems of temple service, corvée labour, slavery, dependence, and royal administration. Were these stories sacred explanations for why humans work? Were they reflections of social inequality? Were they theological attempts to place hardship inside a cosmic plan? The clay lets all these questions remain in the room. You feel the weight of them. The canal bank grows darker under the lowering light. Insects gather above the water. Mud dries on the imagined arms of the pre-human workers. Their silence is not empty. It holds resentment, endurance, and the slow recognition that even divine order may rest upon tired backs. The ancient world does not hide this. It folds it into creation itself. Perhaps that is why the story feels older than comfort. Many later cultures imagine paradise as a place without toil. Mesopotamian tradition often sees ordered existence as inseparable from work. The field must be prepared. The temple must be supplied. The gods must be fed through offerings. The city must be maintained. Work is not a punishment added after everything goes wrong. It is built into the structure of things. This is both practical and severe. You pause beside the water, listening for voices. Maybe there is a mutter from a worker who's carried one basket too many. Maybe there is a decree from a higher god, calm and official, which is always easier when someone else holds the shovel. Maybe there is no sound at all, only the pressure of an old idea pressing through damaged lines of clay. A world can be wholly and unfair, eh? The Sumerian and wider Mesopotamian imagination had room for that tension. Gods could be powerful without being morally simple. Humans could be necessary without being central. Labour could be sacred without being pleasant. This complexity gives the old material its strange endurance. It does not flatter the listener into sleep. It lets the listener drift through difficult truths softened by distance. The workers before Samkind begin to fade into the dusk. They are not gone. Their role remains like a hollow in the earth, waiting for another shape to fill it. The canal is unfinished. The fields are not yet properly ordered. The great powers still require service. The cosmos still requires maintenance. Something must be made that can endure command, hunger, fatigue, and memory. Something made of earth would do. That thought gathers slowly, almost reluctantly. Clay lies everywhere across the plain. Clay is patient, common, and obedient to pressure. It receives marks, it forms bricks, it holds water for a time, then hardens. It can be shaped into a bowl, a tablet, a figurine, or a body imagined in sacred speech. If a worker must be made for a muddy world, clay is an appropriate beginning. The night air cools around the silent labourers. Their burdens have not yet disappeared, but the story has begun searching for someone else to carry them. Not a king first, not a scholar, not a hero with polished weapons and excellent self-esteem, a worker, a servant, a creature whose destiny may begin in the ache between need and command. You stand in that ache. The old tablet does not shout its conclusion. It lets the pressure build. Before humanity, the world has powers, layers, waters, and tasks. It has authority above and demand below. It has beings who labour in the dimness and perhaps dream of rest. Somewhere within that unrest, the idea of humankind begins to take shape. Not as triumph, as relief for someone else. Your gaze lowers to the clay beneath your feet. It is not noble clay. It does not shine. It is not hidden inside a jewel box, guarded by polite labels and climate control. It is common earth, pressed by water, darkened by silt, and thick with the memory of reeds, roots, insects, and flood. Yet in the ancient story, this plain substance becomes the edge of a terrifying intimacy. A body may be shaped from it, not carved from mountain stone, not hammered from celestial metal, not sung into being as pure light, which would be elegant, but frankly difficult to irrigate. The human being begins nearer to the canal bank, nearer to mud, nearer to the hand that kneads and presses. In Sumerian and later Mesopotamian imagination, clay is not a symbol chosen at random. It is the material of houses, tablets, bowls, figurines, seals, and bricks. It is the material that accepts form. It is also the material that remembers touch. Ancient Mesopotamian creation traditions often connect humanity with clay, divine intention, and the need to relieve divine labour. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Chicago, and Yale have long examined these stories as theological reflections on work, mortality, and social order. This mainstream fact gives the myth its quiet force. The first human is not imagined mainly as a ruler. The first human is imagined as a solution to a burden. That is a heavy beginning. You stand near a shallow pool where silt has settled into a smooth grey bed. The air smells of wet earth, salt, and old vegetation. A divine hand, or perhaps the hands of a goddess skilled in birth, presses into the clay. The surface yields, water glistens, a shape rises where no face had been. Shoulders appear, then limbs, then the rough suggestion of breath. The scene is tender and unsettling. Creation is an act of care, but also assignment. The creature is formed because the world needs a worker. The clay body is not meaningless. It is shaped with purpose already waiting inside it. Like a command sealed before the envelope is opened, you may feel the discomfort in that. To be made for service is different from being made only for wonder. And yet service is not emptiness. In temple society, service could mean closeness to the sacred, to bring offerings, maintain shrines, prepare food, sing hymns, and preserve ritual order. It was not merely practical labour. It was relationship. The human role may begin under obligation, but obligation in the ancient world could bind earth to heaven. A servant of the god was not necessarily insignificant. He stood inside the system that kept the world awake. Still, he probably wanted a rest. A small human truth survives every era. The image of dust, clay, and purpose belongs to a world where bodies are fragile. Clay dries and cracks, bricks erode under rain, tablets shatter when dropped, mud walls need repair. Human body made from such matter carries the same vulnerability. Skin dries, bones break, breath stops. The myth does not hide mortality behind golden language. It places mortality at the foundation. You are earth with duties. That phrase feels blunt, but a quirky fringe tidbit appears around the mixture used in some Mesopotamian creation stories. Modern alternative writers have sometimes focused on the idea of divine blood mixed with clay, claiming it hints at hidden knowledge about inheritance or engineered life. Professional historians do not read the texts as scientific manuals, yet the image is undeniably powerful. Clay alone gives substance, while divine essence gives animation, identity, or fate. The mixture makes humanity both low and strangely elevated. Mud below, mystery within. This is why the old story refuses to become simple. If humans are made from clay, they belong to earth. If they are shaped by divine hands, they belong to purpose. If something divine is involved in their animation, they are more than tools. If their first task is labour, they are not free in the modern romantic sense. The human creature stands at the crossing of material, command, and sacred breath. The open scholarly debate continues in soft tones. Researchers ask whether these creation accounts primarily explain human mortality, justify social labour, reflect temple ideology, or explore the painful bond between gods and people. Some emphasize ritual meaning, some study economic background, some read the myths as profound reflections on why civilized life demands endless work. The texts allow all these approaches to circle without settling completely. The clay keeps its own counsel. You imagine the newly shaped human lying still on damp ground. The body is not yet familiar with itself. Fingers curl slightly, as if remembering the hand that made them. The chest begins to rise. Breath enters, and with breath comes the first uncertain border between object and being. The world has acquired a listener. The first sensation may be cool mud beneath the back. The next may be light. Then wait. To wake as human is to wake already placed between need and command. There is water to manage, it's a grain to grow, offerings to prepare, songs to learn, a dead to bury, names to remember. No one asks whether this schedule is convenient. Creation, apparently, has excellent confidence in delegation. Yet there is a secret dignity hidden inside the burden. A being made to serve can also notice. A being made to carry can also remember. A being formed for labour can press signs into clay and ask why labour exists. This may be the deepest turn in the old tale. Humanity is created to sustain the divine order, but eventually humanity records the story of that order. The servant becomes the witness. The witness becomes memory. You feel the first human gaze lift toward the sky. The heavens are already measured. The rivers already move. The divine ranks already hold their stations. The world is ancient. Even in the first moment of human awareness, that new gaze is late, but not irrelevant. It gives the cosmos something it did not have in the same way before. It gives the world a creature that can wonder while working. That is not a small gift. A council decree from a later city might improve how labour was assigned in temple estates, how fields, rations, and duties were managed through writing. Such documents are ordinary, but they help explain the mythic imagination. People who lived inside systems of obligation naturally asked whether obligation itself had a cosmic beginning. The answer preserved in clay is severe, but not careless. Humans work because work belongs to the structure of existence. The old myth does not flatter you. It includes you. You kneel beside the imagined body of the first person, and the mud stains your hands. The human form is familiar to yourself, strange. It is not born from royal luxury. It rises from the same material used to repair walls and record barley. That may be unsettling, but it is also intimate. Clay is near, clay is touchable. Clay can be shaped by pressure and remade by water. Perhaps humanity is like that. Perhaps the ancient scribes understood that identity is not fixed like stones, but formed, impressed, dried, broken, copied, and sometimes fired by disaster into unexpected endurance. A person works, suffers, speaks, and disappears. A tablet survives. A name remains. A myth crosses centuries by hiding inside school exercises, temple archives, and the stubborn patience of baked earth. The first purpose is not the final meaning. That is important. The human being may enter the story as a worker, yet the story cannot contain all that humans become. They build cities, compose hymns, invent jokes, cheat on accounts, mourn their children, praise their gods, and complain about copper quality with admirable precision. They are made from clay, but clay can hold astonishing things. In the hush of the ancient plain, dust rises around the first breath. The gods have their servant. The world has its keeper. The rivers have hands to guide them. Badly at first, then better, then badly again, because humanity is consistent in its inconsistency. You listen to that first breath fade into countless later breaths. The clay body stands. Purpose has entered the world wearing fragile skin. The plain begins to gather the shape of cities before people fill them. Not cities in the strict earthly sense. Not yet walls crowded with merchants, courtyards, kitchens, shrines, and sleeping dogs. These are cities as intentions. Cities as places chosen in the mind of the sacred order. Cities waiting inside the mud like tablets waiting inside wet clay before the first sign is pressed. You stand where Eridu will rise from the low country. The air is damp with marsh breath. Reeds cluster in thick green walls around shining pools. The soil is dark, soft, and slow to release the foot. Somewhere nearby, fish move through water hidden beneath floating plants. The wind carries the scent of salt, mud, and sun-warmed vegetation. It is not yet a city of crowded lanes. It is a sacred patch of low earth, watching the water. Ancient tradition remembered Eridu as one of the oldest and most sacred settlements of southern Mesopotamia. Archaeological work has found a long sequence of temple building there, with one sanctuary constructed over another across many generations. Scholars at major research institutions have often treated Eridu as central to understanding early Sumerian religion, because its ruins show how sacred space could become layered through time. A temple did not simply stand in one moment, it accumulated memory. That is what a city does. It gathers repetition until place becomes fate. In the old imagination, some cities seem to exist in divine thought before their full human form appears. A settlement may be built by hands, but its sacred identity belongs to an older design. A temple is raised from brick, yet its meaning descends from above and rises from below. This is why the cities waiting without people feel so strange. They are not empty because they are meaningless. They are empty because meaning has arrived early. The door has been prepared. The guests are late. Your path leads from the marsh toward another imagined mound, where Uruk will later stretch wide beneath the sun. There, one day, walls will rise, workshops will thicken, seals will mark goods, offerings will move through temple courts, stories of kings will cling to the city like smoke to a roof beam. Yet in this suspended moment, Uruk is only a possibility in the ground. The silence is enormous. No potter turns a wheel. No brewer watches grain ferment. No scribe frowns at a difficult total. No priest adjusts a ritual vessel with the grave expression of someone handling the universe and also trying not to spill oil. The future city exists as pressure, not sound, although it is a pattern waiting for hands. A mainstream historical fact gives this vision its earthly frame. Uruk became one of the first great urban centres in the world during the 4th millennium before the Common Era, with monumental architecture, administrative technologies, and dense social organisation. Research from institutions such as Yale, Stanford, and Chicago has helped show how its growth transformed settlement, labour, craftsmanship, and record-keeping. The scale of Uruk was not merely larger than a village, it represented a new form of human. Just live there. But here, no human crowd has arrived. The ground holds only promise. You feel the heat lift from the plain in wavering sheets. The sky is pale and immense. A hawk circles above the empty mound, as if inspecting real estate long before anyone sensible has considered drainage. The thought is absurd, but the ancient world allows absurdity to sit beside awe. Every sacred city begins as mud with ambition. The old texts sometimes describe kingship, temples, or city foundations as descending from heaven. That phrase does not need to be read crudely. It suggests that earthly order receives legitimacy from a realm beyond ordinary desire. A city is not only a place where people happen to gather, it is a place where cosmic order is anchored. This is a powerful idea. It is also politically convenient. Kings loved such ideas. Naturally, if a city's order comes from heaven, then the ruler who claims to maintain that order gains a rather impressive glow. Yet the idea is older and deeper than royal publicity. It reflects a culture in which city, temple, god, and land were woven together. To live in a city was to live inside a sacred economy of offerings, labour, protection, and dependence. The open scholarly debate moves through the empty lanes that are not yet lanes. Researchers continue to ask how much early Mesopotamian urbanization was driven by temples, trade, population pressure, irrigation demands, elite competition, or shifting environmental conditions. Some emphasize religious institutions, some focus on economic management, others study household production and regional networks. The city refuses to have only one cause. Cities rarely do. They are piles of motives baked in some. A quirky fringe tidbit clings to the imagined emptiness. Some modern writers have proposed that ancient Mesopotamian cities were planned according to hidden celestial maps, mirroring stars or divine pathways. Professional archaeology treats such claims cautiously, because the evidence is often thin and enthusiasm is often very muscular. Yet ancient builders did care about orientation, sacred placement, ritual foundation, and the symbolic power of location. The city was never merely practical. A brick could be theology, a wall could be argument, a doorway could be fear made useful. You walk through a city that has not yet hardened into streets. Your foot crosses the future line of a wall. Your hand passes through the place where a shrine entrance may one day stand. You can almost hear the future layered upon the silence. Grinding spågelsöpumdåkord. Goatstio, bargaining key hutjans. The hymns. Footsteps on packed clay, the thump of bricks being set in mortar, the wet slap of plaster against a wall. Yet the absence remains stronger. It reminds you that human civilization is not the beginning of place. Places existed before us, carrying water, elevation, fertility, danger, and symbolic force. Humans do not create meaning from nothing. They discover, impose, negotiate, misunderstand, and then build anyway. The ancient city waiting without people is the landscape becoming legible before anyone can read it. This is the sleepier truth beneath the grand one. A city begins as a tension. Someone notices a mound above flood level. Someone notices access to water. Someone remembers a sacred association. Someone says this place matters. Then others agree, or are persuaded, or are ordered, which is a very old and efficient form of agreement. Over generations, the place becomes heavier with memory. The first shrine becomes an older shrine beneath a newer shrine. The city becomes a vertical stack of decisions. Eridu's temples show this especially well. Layer built upon layer, offering place above offering place, sacred ground renewed through repeated construction. Even if the oldest builders never imagined the later centuries, their actions created depth. Archaeology reads that depth in walls, floors, pottery, ash, and foundation remains. Myth reads it as sacred antiquity. Both are ways of looking downward. You stand at the edge of the future temple platform. The evening light turns the mud brick colour of old honey. The first workers have not yet come in this imagined pre-human frame. Yet the design feels close, a raised place, a house for a god, a storehouse of offerings, a point where earth admits it is not enough by itself. The city will gather people because it gathers power. Or perhaps it gathers power because people gather there. The debate continues softly. What matters for the tablet's hidden timeline is the lateness of the human crowd. The sacred places seem to wait with identities already forming. The canals are not dug, but water marks the land. The temples are not built, but height and foundation have meaning. The walls are not raised, but boundaries are already imagined in the divine order. Humanity will enter not an empty wilderness, but a waiting grid of duties, sites, and names. You can feel the names approaching. Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, Lagash. Cities that will become more than coordinates. They will become divine households, political centres, archives of labour and engines of memory. They will compete, boast, fall, rebuild, and leave behind broken tablets for distant strangers to interpret under electric lights. This is the long comedy of civilization. We build for forever, and forever hires archaeologists. The night settles over the uninhabited foundations. Pools darken, reeds flatten under the breeze. The future's streets remain invisible, but not absent. They sleep beneath the plain like lines under closed eyelids. You stand among them quietly, sensing that the world before humanity already contains places where humanity will become intensely itself. The city waits without footsteps. Its silence is not empty. It is architectural. The clay grows quiet where the writing breaks. A line begins with confidence, then falls into damage. A sign remains clear on one side, while the rest has been eaten by fracture, salt, handling, and the ordinary cruelty of time. You lean closer, expecting revelation, but the tablet answers with absence. There is no dramatic glow, no sudden completion, no hidden sentence kindly preserved for the tired modern mind. There is only a gap. That gap is now empty. It has weight, almost like a sealed room behind a wall. The missing lines become part of the story because they make you aware of how much the ancient world refuses to give back. You can see the surviving wedges, each one pressed by a hand that once knew the whole passage. The scribe did not imagine that strangers thousands of years later would hover over his broken work, trying to decide whether one damaged mark meant water, lord, city, creation, or something embarrassingly practical like a delivery of reeds. History enjoys that kind of joke. You stand in the half-light of an archive chamber. Dust floats in a narrow beam from a high opening. Shelves of clay tablets lean under their own dull weight. Some are whole, some are chipped, some are sealed in envelopes. Some have split into pieces that no longer meet. The scent is dry earth, old smoke, and a faint mineral bitterness from the clay. Nothing here feels alive, yet every object has passed through living hands. The missing lines are not simply a problem for translation. They are a reminder that ancient memory survives unevenly. Archaeologists and Assyriologists working at institutions such as Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have reconstructed Mesopotamian literature from fragments gathered across many sites. This is a mainstream historical fact, and it matters deeply. Many famous texts are not single perfect copies. They are careful assemblies built from broken tablets, variant versions, later duplicates, and scholarly patience. The past arrives in pieces. A modern edition of an ancient composition may look clean on the page, but behind that neatness lies uncertainty. A bracket here, a question there, a missing section marked with caution, a sign read one way by one scholar and another way by a colleague who is, naturally, also quite certain. The printed translation may feel smooth, but the original clay is often scarred, stubborn, and incomplete. This is where humility enters. The tablet's damage slows the imagination. It prevents easy certainty. It teaches you to listen not only to what survives, but to what has vanished. When a creation story loses several lines at the moment of its deepest mystery, the silence can feel almost intentional. Of course, is not intentional. Time is not a novelist with excellent pacing. Yet the effect is powerful. The missing words become a shadow that lengthens everything around them. You notice a broken edge where the clay is lighter inside than outside. The surface was darkened by age and handling, but the wound shows a softer colour, as if the tablet has been freshly injured. Along the break, half signs cling like reeds at the edge of floodwater. One wedge turns downward, another cuts sideways, a third is too worn to trust. A scholar might hesitate there for years. That hesitation is honourable. A quirky fringe tidbit often grows from such damage. When ancient tablets are broken, some modern writers imagine that the missing lines must have contained the most forbidden knowledge. The lost part always becomes suspiciously convenient. It explains everything, proves everything, and usually confirms exactly what the writer already believed. This is not good scholarship, but it is very human. People look into gaps and see their own lanterns. The clay does not cooperate so easily. A missing line may have held a cosmic secret. It may also have held a repeated phrase, a ritual formula, a list of divine names, or a dull transition that would disappoint everyone. We do not know. That is the discipline. That is the ache. The ancient world gives enough to draw you forward, but not enough to let you own it completely. The open scholarly debate becomes especially careful in damaged texts. Specialists may disagree over whether a broken passage belongs to one mythic tradition or another, whether a divine name is restored correctly, whether a later copy preserves an older reading, or whether a phrase reflects Sumerian origin or later interpretation. Such debates do not weaken the story, they make it more truthful. The old record is not a glass window, it is a cracked mirror, and yet a cracked mirror still reflects. You turn the tablet gently in your imagination. Its reverse side holds more signs, though some have been rubbed nearly flat. Perhaps it was copied by a student. Perhaps it came from a temple archive. Perhaps it belonged to a learned household. Perhaps it was thrown aside when the room burned, then hardened in the fire that destroyed its context. Every possibility changes the mood. Context is the missing frame. A tablet found in a palace archive speaks differently from one found in a school exercise room. A myth copied by a trainee may reveal education as much as belief. A ritual text near a temple vessels may carry performance within it. A fragment without find spot drifts in uncertainty, like a loose reed on floodwater. Modern museums hold many such objects, acquired in earlier eras when excavation and collecting did not always preserve the information now considered essential. That loss cannot be repaired fully. It can only be acknowledged. You feel the dim archive widen around you. Each broken tablet becomes an island. Between the islands lies dark water. The scholar travels by comparison, matching phrases, signs, grammar, and themes. One fragment supplies a name, another supplies an action. A third gives only 2 words, but those 2 words unlock a pattern. It is slow work, almost monastic, and wonderfully unsuited to loud certainty. The lost lines invite speculation, but they also discipline it. Perhaps the damaged passage once described the world before human beings in greater detail. Perhaps it named a place under the earth, a divine decree since we forgotten servant race, or a first act of measurement. Perhaps it merely repeated what another tablet says more clearly. The responsible mind keeps each, perhaps in its place. It does not force the clay to confess more than it knows. Still, you can feel why the gaps haunt people. A complete text gives answers, a broken text gives doors. The missing lines create a rhythm in the narration of antiquity. Surviving words rise like stones in shallow water. And your mind steps from one to the next, between them. Darkness is moved. That darkness is not ignorance alone. It is the space where ancient voices were lost, where smoke consumed shelves, where floods dissolved records, where later builders reused mud brick, where human memory proved both magnificent and fragile. A soft sound echoes in the archive. It might be a tablet settling on a shelf. It might be your own breath. It might be the imagined scratch of a reed stylus returning to a line that no longer exists. You look at the gap again, and it seems less like failure. Volia. It feels like the tablet's oldest lesson. Human beings were made to remember, but they remember incompletely. They build archives and lose them. They copy myths and alter them. They preserve names and forget the faces behind them. They ask what came before humanity. Yet the very records that answer are damaged by the same time they try to cross. So, the gap remains. It does not close. And in that unfinished space, the world before humanity feels larger than any surviving sentence could make it. The clay road turns toward kings who seem too large for ordinary time. Their names raked from old lists like figures seen through river mist. Some reign for thousands of years, some rule before a flood, some stand at the edge where memory becomes ceremony, and ceremony becomes something stranger than history. You do not meet them in a palace first, you met up their shores, them in numbers. Because Mesopotamia often lets numbers carry o'er. The tablet of kings is not gentle with expectation. It gives cities, rulers, reigns, a rhythm of power passing from place to place. Kingship descends. A city holds it. Another city receives it. Time stretches until the mind cannot follow without surrendering. A ruler may reign for a length so vast that no human body could contain it. Yet the list speaks calmly, as if reporting a change in weather. That calmness is unsettling. The Sumerian king list is a real ancient composition known from several copies, studied by scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Yale, and the University of Pennsylvania. It organizes early rulers and cities into a sequence of kingship, including a striking division between rulers before and after a great flood. This mainstream historical fact matters because the list is neither simple history nor simple fantasy. It is a political memory shaped through mythic time. You stand in a dim room where a scribe copies royal name. The clay is still damp beneath his hand. A small lamp burns nearby. giving off the smell of oil and smoke. Outside, and the city quiets under evening heat. Inside, the names continue. City follows city, rule follows rule. The scribe does not need to explain why a reign lasted impossibly long. He writes within a tradition where the earliest time is not measured by the small bones of modern realism. Ancient time expands near the beginning. It does this in many cultures. The first ages are often wider, brighter, heavier, or stranger than the present. Ancestors live longer. Gods walk nearer. Giants appear at the edges. Floods divide worlds. Memory does not behave like a clock. It behaves like a temple shadow lengthening across the courtyard. In the Sumerian king list, the long reigns before the flood create a sense of distance so vast that ordinary kingship seems descended from another kind of world. The early rulers are not merely old, they belong to a time when political authority appears almost cosmic. Kingship itself is treated as something that can move, descend, be held, and be transferred. That is not just government, it is sacred possession. A quirky fringe tidbit has grown fiercely around these long reigns. Some modern writers claim they preserve literal memories of immortal rulers, alien dynasties, or of vanished species with unusual lifespans. Professional historians do not accept such readings as evidence, yet the fascination is understandable because the numbers really are strange. They are too grand to feel like ordinary reign lengths, and too carefully written to dismiss as random nonsense. The ancient scribes knew what they were doing. The question is what kind of doing it was. The open scholarly debate continues with patient intensity. Researchers ask whether the long reigns symbolize prestige, sacred antiquity, numerical patterning, political theology, or inherited mythic tradition. Some scholars treat the list as an ideological document, designed to show kingship moving legitimately through chosen cities. Others study how it combines older local traditions into one grand sequence. The debate remains alive because the text stands with 1 foot in history and 1 foot in myth. That is a difficult posture. It is also a powerful one. You imagine one of those Shurla cities beneath a strange dawn. Its ruler's name has not yet become a safe academic word in a catalogue. It is spoken in a hall of mud brick, beneath beams darkened by smoke. Courtiers gather, priests watch today. Workers bring offerings. A seal is pressed into clay. The king is not simply a strong man with a chair. He is the holder of order for a city that believes the universe itself has a structure of command. Kingship descends from heaven, the old tradition says. It does not wander in from the market. This idea gives the king a sacred frame. He maintains justice, builds temples, wages war, digs canals, and boasts on inscriptions with the durable modesty for which rulers are famous. Yet his authority is not entirely his own. It belongs to a power beyond him, bestowed for a time, then removed. A city may flourish while kingship rests there. Another city may rise when kingship moves away. The list becomes a map of destiny. It also becomes propaganda, politely dressed in antiquity. A council decree or royal inscription from ancient Mesopotamia can show how rulers tied their power to divine favour, temple building, and justice. Such records confirm that political legitimacy was often expressed through sacred language. The king repaired a shrine, restored an order, received command, or acted under divine protection. These claims were practical, but they were also cosmic. In Mesopotamia, a ruler did not merely manage a city, he performed order. You hear the slow beat of drums in a royal courtyard. The sound moves through dust and heat. A procession advances toward a temple gate. Men carry offerings. Women sing. Officials count supplies with faces that suggest the gods appreciate accurate inventories. The king stands between crowd and deity, not fully divine in the same way as some Egyptian pharaohs, but far more than a municipal administrator with a fancy hat. He is a hinge. The flood memory cuts through this royal sequence like a dark river through clay. Before it, reigns are immense. After it, the numbers shrink across the tradition, though they may still remain far from ordinary. The flood acts as a boundary between kinds of time. It separates a mythic age from a more recognisably human one. It is not merely a weather event in the list, it is a cosmic punctuation mark. The world changes, the rhythm changes, human memory changes. Flood stories across Mesopotamian literature are among the most famous ancient narratives, preserved in several forms and later echoed far beyond Sumer. Scholars have studied these traditions as myth, theology, environmental memory, and literary inheritance. In the low floodplains of Mesopotamia, where water could destroy as well as nourish, the idea of a catastrophic flood carried particular force. It was both imaginable and symbolic. Water could end a world. Water could also begin another. The kings after the flood feel closer, even when still wrapped in legend. Their cities connect more clearly with known places. Their names begin to approach the zone where archaeology, inscription, and later memory sometimes meet. The impossible fog thins, but never disappears completely. That is the beauty of the list. It does not build a wall between myth and record, lets them overlap like wet colours. You watch the scribe press another royal name into clay. His hand is steady. He is not writing entertainment in the modern sense. He is preserving an order of time, authority, and sacred history. He may not be concerned with your categories. Myth, history, politics, and theology are not filed separately in his mind. They are bound in the same tablet, because the king's reign, the city's fate, and the god's favour all belong to one world. The very long reigns pull your imagination backward toward a human absence. They suggest that history, as people later understand it, rests on older foundations where time does not yet behave. Before the measured reigns of known kings, there is another scale. Before ordinary rule, there is enormous rule. Before civic memory becomes plausible, it passes through a dream of cities receiving kingship from heaven. This dream is not useless. It tells you how early people located themselves inside time. They were not standing at the beginning, proud and fresh. They were heirs. They believed authority had descended through ages already ancient. They looked backward and saw not emptiness, but a chain of cities, rulers, floods, losses, and renewals. The present was late, and lateness gave it weight. The lamp beside the scribe flickers. Shadows move over the tablet. A royal name dries into permanence, or something close to permanence, because clay is patient but not immortal. The scribe lifts his reed, and for one suspended breath the list seems less like a record and more like a staircase. Each king is a step, each city is a landing. The flood is a broken place where the stairs vanish into dark water. You cannot prove every figure. You cannot ignore them either. They remain there, these kings after the flood memory, carrying impossible years and political longing through the hands of scribes. They remind you that ancient history does not begin with certainty. It begins with fragments arranged into meaning. It begins with rulers who become symbols, cities that become vessels, and disasters that divide time. Somewhere in the quiet, kingship moves again. A city receives it, a city loses it, and the clay keeps counting. Your path sinks beneath the temple floor, not through a staircase that any excavator has found intact, and not through some convenient tunnel carved for the comfort of storytellers. It is a descent of imagination, guided by the way ancient people thought about sacred foundations. Above you, the temple rises in layers of mud brick, white plaster, smoke, and chant. Beneath you, the earth seems to darken into hidden water. The ground is not empty. It holds depth. In Mesopotamian thought, the deep freshwater realm carried enormous sacred meaning. It was linked with wisdom, creation, hidden abundance, and the divine powers associated with underground waters. Scholars at universities such as Oxford, Yale, and Chicago have studied how this watery depth shaped myths, rituals, and temple symbolism. This mainstream fact matters because the temple did not simply stand on dirt. In sacred imagination, it stood above mystery. You feel that mystery through your feet. The floor is cool, packed hard by generations of movement. Priests have crossed it carrying bowls, baskets, oil, bread, beer, dates, and offerings arranged with careful hands. Incense has stained the air. Lamps have trembled in their niches. The god's house has received songs and food, while the city outside has brought its labour inward. Yet beneath all this order lies something older, darker, and less manageable. Water under stone, silence under prayer, depth under civilization. The temple is a visible building, but it also behaves like a vertical idea. Its foundations enter the earth, while its upper walls reach toward heaven. It binds high and low, seen and unseen, present and primeval. When you stand inside such a place, you are not only standing in architecture, you are standing at a crossing. The scent changes as your mind ascends. The bright smell of sun-baked brick fades. The air becomes damp, mineral, and close. You imagine a foundation trench opened long ago, its sides cut into earth, its base prepared for sacred construction. A small object may be placed there, a deposit hidden from ordinary sight. A ritual may mark the beginning. The building is not only built, it is rooted. Ancient Mesopotamian temples sometimes included foundation deposits, inscriptions, and ritual objects placed beneath walls or corners. Archaeologists have found evidence that builders marked sacred construction with acts meant to secure divine presence and the memory. A foundation was therefore not just engineering, it was communication with the future, the gods, and the unseen ground. That's a lot of responsibility for the mud brick. But mud brick accepts pressure well. You imagine a priest lowering a small inscribed object into a prepared hollow. His hands are dusty. The sun has not yet reached the bottom of the trench. Workers stand nearby, quiet for once, perhaps relieved that ritual briefly interrupts carrying bricks. The deposit disappears beneath the structure. No worshipper walking above will see it, yet its hiddenness is part of its power. Some knowledge is meant to be buried. The deep below the temple is not simply a place of darkness, it is also the source of life-giving water. In the southern alluvium, where rivers, canals, marshes, and groundwater shaped daily existence, depth could summon fertility. The unseen water-fed springs, wells, fields, and sacred imagination. To think of wisdom rising from the deep was not strange in such a world. It was landscape translated into theology. A quirky fringe tidbit drifts through this underground space. Some modern enthusiasts have suggested that Sumerian references to deep waters hide memories of submerged archives, secret chambers, or even ancient machines beneath temples. Professional archaeology does not support those dramatic claims, yet the fascination comes from something real. Mesopotamian temples did hold archives, deposits, and sacred objects, and their myths often placed wisdom in hidden depths. The mystery is already rich enough. It needs no machinery. You continue downward in thought, toward the domain associated with fresh waters and learned power. Here the deep is not the same as the sea. It is not merely a violent flood or a distant ocean. It is the concealed reservoir under the world, a cosmic storehouse of fertility and knowledge. The ancient mind could imagine creation emerging from watery depth. While civilization depended on controlled water at the surface, above, canals require labour. Below, water carries wisdom. Between them stands the temple. The open scholarly debate here turns on interpretation. Researchers continue to ask how literally ancient worshippers imagined cosmic geography within temple space. Did they understand the temple as a symbolic model of the universe, a ritual meeting point, a political centre dressed in cosmic language, or all of these at once? The strongest answers avoid pretending these categories were separate in ancient life. The temple was house, storehouse, theatre, archive, and world model. It was practical and holy, That combination feels strange only to modern habits. You hear faint sounds from above, a footstep, a chant, a vessel set down carefully, then the sounds blur into the murmur of water that may not exist physically below this exact floor, but exists powerfully in the religious imagination. The temple seems to float on ancient depth. Every offering placed on the altar becomes part of a larger exchange between surface and hidden source. This idea changes the role of humanity. Humans do not merely serve gods in a bright courtyard, they maintain a passage between realms. They carry food, words, and ritual attention into a building whose foundation touches older mystery. Their labour keeps the sacred house active, and through that house, the cosmic order remains present in the city. A person sweeping the floor may be doing more than cleaning dust. He may be helping the world remain arranged. That is either beautiful or exhausting. Probably both. The deep below the temple also carries unease. Depth is fertile, but it is not fully safe. Hidden things nourish and threaten. Water can rise, foundations can weaken, secrets can be lost. The same underground realm that suggests wisdom also reminds you that civilization rests on something it cannot completely control. Every city, however proud, is built over uncertainty. You can feel that beneath the bricks. The temple's upper rooms may contain polished vessels, stored grain, statues, and controlled ritual. But below, imagination finds black water, old silence, and powers not fully visible. The contrast is central. Human beings love surfaces they can manage. Ancient religion repeatedly directs attention beneath those surfaces, where management becomes prayer. The deep does not explain itself. It receives offerings indirectly, it supports what stands above, keeps its own darkness. Even when priests sing in the bright court, this hiddenness gives the temple its solemn weight. A building raised for a god must be seen by the city, but its foundation must vanish. The most important support is the least visible. That is also true of memory. The stories you follow survive through visible tablets, but behind them are lost voices, vanished rituals, local traditions, and older performances no clay has preserved. The written line is the temple wall, the unwritten depth is beneath it. You cannot separate them without damaging both. A faint chill moves through the imagined foundation chamber. The lamp flame bends, moisture beads along the clay surface. Somewhere above, the city continues its ordinary life, with trade, arguments, cooking, sweet laughter, and someone almost certainly miscounting jars. Below, the temple rests upon a sacred depth that makes ordinary life possible and mysterious at once. Perhaps this is why the old world feels so layered. It does not offer a flat history of human progress. It gives you a city standing over a temple standing over a foundation touching hidden water, and hidden water returning thought to creation itself. Humanity's role appears small within that stack, but not meaningless. The small human carries offerings across thresholds that larger powers have made. You stand in the cool dark and listen. The water below the temple is not loud. It does not rush like a storm flood or crash against stone. It waits. It glimmers in the mind as source, memory, and warning. The temple above may shine in sunlight, but its deepest strength belongs to what cannot be seen. And beneath every sacred brick, the old depth continues breathing. The temple archive opens like a throat of dried earth. You enter through a doorway where the light narrows, and the noise of the outer court softens behind thick mud brick walls. The room is not grand in the way a palace hall is grand. It is low, practical, and close, filled with shelves, baskets, sealed jars, and tablets arranged by hands that trusted order more than ornament. Dust rests on everything. It lies over clay like a second skin. Here, memory is not cleaned. It is managed. A priest or senior scribe moves through the archive with careful steps. His robe brushes against the wall. His fingers know which shelf holds offerings, which corner holds school exercises, which box contains hymns, and which tablets should not be handled by a student unless everyone enjoys preventable disaster. The room smells of dry clay, lamp smoke, old reed, and stored grain drifting faintly from nearby chambers. This is the world behind sacred survival. Ancient Mesopotamian temples and scribal schools preserve text through copying, teaching, and ritual use. Research from institutions such as Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania has shown that scribes transmitted myths, hymns, lexical lists, omens, and administrative records across many generations. That mainstream fact matters because the story of the world before humanity did not survive by accident alone. It survived because people copied it. Copying is a sacred technology. It is also, one suspects, very boring by the third hour. A young apprentice sits beside a flat lump of clay, trying to reproduce a difficult line from an older tablet. His reed stylus trembles slightly. The sign must be angled correctly. The spacing must be controlled. One mistake can change a name, a number, or a divine action. The teacher watches with the calm intensity of someone who has seen civilization threatened by poor handwriting. The apprentice presses too deeply. The teacher sighs. Somewhere in that small sigh, history continues. You stand near the apprentice and feel how fragile transmission is. A myth can cross centuries only if hands keep remaking it. One scribe copies from another. One school preserves a passage. One temple recites a hymn. One archive burns, and the fire hardens what it consumes. Another archive collapses, and rain dissolves tablets back into mud. Memory is never a simple road. It is a narrow bridge rebuilt during storms. The priests reading a broken world are not merely worshippers. They are caretakers of They know which offering belongs to which day. They know which divine name belongs in which chant. They know how ritual action must follow another, because disorder in ritual is not merely embarrassing. It risks disturbing the bond between city and God in their hands. Texts are not only literature, they are instructions for keeping the world aligned. The tablet is therefore not a dead object. It is a tool for order. When a priest reads a creation story, he may not be reading as a modern person reads for curiosity. He reads within a temple world where origin, ritual, labour, and authority speak to one another. The beginning of the cosmos is not safely distant. It explains why offerings matter now, why humans serve now, why cities maintain divine houses now, and why the old arrangement must be renewed. This makes the archive feel alive. Even the quiet tablets seem to listen. A quirky fringe tidbit lingers near the shelves. Some modern seekers imagine temple archives as secret libraries of forbidden knowledge, guarded by initiated priests who hid the true story of human origins from common people. Professional historians are more cautious. Temples certainly guarded specialized knowledge, and scribal learning was not available to everyone. Yet many surviving tablets are exercises, lists, receipts, and ordinary records. The sacred archive contains mystery, yes, but also bureaucracy. The gods received hymns. They also received inventories. That mixture is essential. It prevents the ancient world from becoming too polished in imagination. Priests did not float through blue incense all day, whispering about the birth of time. They supervised offerings, rations, fields, personnel, storage, festivals, repairs, and ritual schedules. The sacred depended on logistics, and logistics depended on writing. The temple was a house of gods, but it was also a machine of memory and supply. A machine made of clay, grain, oil, and obligation. You hear the soft clack of tablets being moved. A seal impression is checked. A line is read aloud. Another priest answers from the far side of the room, his voice low and measured. Outside, a bell or metal object sounds faintly in the courtyard. The archive remains dim, protected from harsh light, as if the past itself requires shade. In this room, the world before humanity becomes readable only through human labour. That is almost paradoxical. A story saying that people arrived late is preserved by people who work very hard to remember it. A myth in which humanity is shaped to relieve divine burdens survives because human scribes accept another burden, the burden of copying. The first purpose returns in another form. Labour becomes memory, memory becomes service, service becomes the fragile bridge to origin. The open scholarly debate whispers among the shelves. Researchers continue to discuss how temple scholars shaped inherited myths during copying. Did they preserve ancient compositions faithfully, or did they adapt them for changing theology, local pride, and political needs? Did scribal schools standardize traditions, or multiply versions through teaching? The answer depends on text, period, and a place. The archive is not a freezer, it is a workshop. A copied myth is not necessarily a weaker myth. Sometimes copying gives it more lives. You imagine an older tablet set before a younger scribe. Its surface is worn, several signs are damaged. The scribe must decide what the line once said. He may know a parallel version from another school. He may restore a familiar phrase. He may misunderstand. He may improve the grammar. He may faithfully preserve an error already centuries old, because tradition has a long memory for mistakes. That thought is strangely comforting. Human beings have always inherited confusion. The priest reading the broken world does not possess perfect access to the beginning. He has fragments, training, ritual duty, and reverence. He approaches the old words with discipline, but also from within his own age. He cannot become the first scribe. He cannot stand in the first temple. He cannot hear the first gathways. He can only receive, preserve, interpret, and pass onward. So can you? The archive becomes a mirror of the larger human condition. Every generation receives broken lines. Every generation repairs them as best it can. Some repairs are careful, some are convenient, some are wrong. But influential, some are humble enough to leave the gap visible. The wise reader knows when to restore and when to remain silent. Silence is also a form of preservation. A lamp flickers beside a stack of tablets. Its flame catches the edges of wedge signs, making shadows inside each small mark. The signs look like tiny doorways pressed into earth. Behind them lie gods, rivers, workers, kings, floods, cities, and a time before human breath. Yet none of these can enter the present without the reader's voice. The priest begins to chant. His voice is low, steady, and almost drowsy. The words move through the archive like water through a channel. The tablets do not glow. The walls do not tremble. No secret door opens behind a shelf, which is a pity for dramatic architecture. Instead, something quieter happens. The broken world is held together for another evening. That is enough. It may be more than enough. The archive darkens as the lamp burns low. The apprentice sets his copied tablet aside to dry. The priest returns the older text to its place. Outside, the city continues under stars, unaware that its deepest memories have just been touched by a human voice in a room of dust. The past does not live by being whole. It lives by being read carefully. At the edge of the civilized world, a strange figure rises from the water, not abruptly, not with splashing drama or theatrical lightning, because the ancient imagination is often calmer than modern posters. The figure appears where marsh, river, and sea breath seem to meet. Reeds bend under the evening wind. Fish disturb the surface in small silver circles. The air carries salt, mud, and the faint sour sweetness of drying weed. Then the shape becomes clearer. A human form stands beneath a covering that looks like the skin of a fish. The head of the creature rests above the human head like a hood. Scales hang along the back, and the mouth of the fish opens over the brow, as if another being is swallowing and revealing the man at once. He comes from the water, yet speaks toward the land. He belongs to the border. Border creatures always make people listen. Don't listen. In later Mesopotamian tradition, especially through accounts preserved by ancient writers and supported by iconographic evidence, sages associated with fish-like forms appear as bringers of wisdom and civilizing knowledge. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Chicago, and Yale have studied these figures as part of a wider tradition of protective beings, learned lore, and mythic memory. This mainstream fact matters because the fishcloak teacher is not merely a fantasy pasted onto Sumer. He belongs to a broader Mesopotamian way of imagining wisdom as something older than ordinary human society. Wisdom comes from the edge. It does not always arrive through the palace door. You stand near the waterline as dusk deepens. The mud is cool. Reeds scrape against one another with a sound like dry cloth. In the distance, a future city glows only in thought. Its temples waiting for knowledge, ritual, measurement, and craft. The figure from the water turns toward the land, and suddenly civilization feels less like invention and more like instruction. This is where the story becomes softly uncertain. The famous tradition of a culture bringer emerging from the Vexed Sea is most clearly known through later ancient authors, not from a perfect early Sumerian tablet that politely explains everything. That distinction matters. It keeps the imagination honest. Still, the image resonates with Mesopotamian themes. The deep waters are linked with wisdom. The marsh and sea edges are places of transformation. Sages and protective beings stand near the boundary between human order and older powers. The fishcloak is not random. It is a portable threshold. A quirky fringe tidbit has made this figure famous far beyond academic study. Modern alternative writers have described fish-cloaked sages as survivors from a lost civilization, visitors from another world, or guardians of forbidden knowledge given to early cities. Professional historians do not accept those claims as proven history, yet the persistence of the idea reveals the power of the image. A teacher from the water, arriving before full civilization, feels like a memory of something humanity did not create alone. The myth does not need certainty to haunt you. The figure raises a hand, and the gesture is not threatening. It is instructive. Perhaps he teaches the making of temples. Perhaps he teaches writing, measurement, law, agriculture, purification, or the proper patterns of ritual. Perhaps later storytellers gathered many inventions into his cloak because one symbol could hold what many generations could not explain separately. Civilization is difficult to credit properly. Everyone one's a bounder. The fish-cloaked teacher offers one, but not an ordinary one. He is not simply a king boasting that he built everything worth mentioning. Although kings are fond of that hobby, he is amphibious in meaning. He comes from a realm beneath or beyond the familiar land, carrying knowledge upward. He suggests that human order is learned from contact with depth. That thought fits the old world beautifully. The deep below the temple, the waters before names, the clay shaped into bodies, the cities waiting in sacred design, all begin to gather around this strange edge figure. He stands where water becomes speech. He is not the beginning of humanity, but he may represent the beginning of instruction. A human creature can work, but work must be organized. A city can rise, but someone must know the plan. A ritual can be performed, but someone must preserve the correct words. Knowledge must cross a boundary. You listen for his voice, but the scene offers no clear language. It gives gestures instead. A hand showing how to cut a canal line, a finger tracing a sign in wet clay, a measured step marking sacred space, a bowl lifted toward a temple, a star indicated in the darkening sky. Nothing is rushed. Knowledge is not hurled into the world, it is demonstrated. That makes the moment quieter and more intimate. The open scholarly debate surrounding these sages is careful and varied. Researchers discuss whether fish-cloaked figures represent mythic ancestors of scribal knowledge, protective spirits, ritual specialists, priestly symbolism, or later literary memory of ancient cultural origins. Some interpret them through art and temple ritual, others compare them with traditions of wisdom beings who precede known kings. The evidence is fascinating, but not simple. Simple evidence rarely survives 5,000 years. You see carved forms in your mind, figures beside sacred trees, doorways, or royal scenes, Their bodies combine human and animal elements. Their presence protects, teaches, and connects. In Mesopotamian art, composite beings are not jokes or mistakes. They express powers that ordinary bodies cannot contain. A wing, a horned crown, a fish cloak, a bird head, each feature can mark a role in the unseen system. The world is full of mixed beings. That tells you something about boundaries. Ancient people did not always imagine categories as sealed boxes. The divine could wear animal strength. Wisdom could arise from water. Kingship could descend from heaven. Death could lie beneath the ground, but speak through rituals above it. Humanity itself could be made from clay and animated by sacred involvement. The fish-cloaked teacher belongs to this flexible, charged world of crossings. He is unsettling because he's helpful. That is an excellent kind of unsettling. You walk beside him through the imagined marsh. His cloak glistens in fading light. Water drips from the fish skin and darkens the soil where it falls. Each drop seems to carry the coolness of hidden depths. He pauses near a patch of smooth clay and presses a sign into it. The mark is simple, but it changes everything. Once a sign can stand for something absent, memory has a body outside the mind. Writing begins as a miracle of pressure. Of course, real writing developed through long administrative and symbolic processes, not because one fish-robed gentleman arrived with a helpful demonstration board. Still, myth compresses slow history into memorable form. It gives the centuries a face. It places the burden of invention on a being who can carry it. That is not poor thinking, it is poetic storage. The ancient world stores complexity in figures. The creature at civilization's edge may also remind you that knowledge is dangerous. To receive instruction is to become responsible. Once humans know how to build, count, irrigate, write, and worship, they inherit duties that cannot be easily refused. The teacher does not bring leisure. He brings order, and order always arrives with lists. Lists are how civilization smiles at your free time. The water behind him grows dark. The land ahead waits under first stars. He belongs to neither side completely. Perhaps that is why the image endured. Humanity itself is also a border creature, formed from earth yet reaching upward, mortal yet capable of preserving names, practical yet addicted to cosmic questions at very inconvenient hours. The fish-cloaked sage begins to fade into the night marsh. No final explanation follows him. No tablet opens to announce precisely who he was in terms comfortable to modern categories. He remains a figure of contact, a soft disturbance at the boundary between depth and city. Through him, the world before humanity does not vanish when people arrive. It teaches, it instructs, it leaves marks. You stand where his wet footprints meet the drying ground. The reeds whisper, the water closes behind him. Somewhere beyond the dark plain, future scribes will copy lists of signs. Priests will recite old names. Kings will claim divine favour. And listeners will wonder whether civilization began entirely with human hands. Perhaps it did. Perhaps it did not feel that way to those who first remembered it. The world begins to move in circles rather than straight lines. Not perfect circles. Not the clean geometry of a scribe drawing with careful pride, but living circles, flood and drying, sowing and harvest, building and collapse, forgetting and copying, to birth and labour, sleep to death, and the soft return of names through the mouths of others. The ancient tablet does not need to say cycle in a modern way. The rhythm is already there, pulsing beneath every broken sign. You feel it in the river. The water rises with season and pressure, spreads across the low country, then retreats and leaves silt shining under the sun. Plants grow where the flood has passed. Men will one day cut channels into the earth, only to watch those channels clog again. Cities will rise on mounds built from old houses, old floors, old bricks, old ashes, and old mistakes. Nothing begins only once. That is the slow lesson. Ancient Mesopotamian history confirms repeated patterns of settlement growth, environmental stress, political change, and urban rebuilding across many centuries. Archaeological research from institutions such as Chicago, Yale, and Pennsylvania has shown that cities in the alluvial south were constantly reshaped by river movement, irrigation demands of salinity, conflict, and changing power. This mainstream fact makes the old myths feel less like distant fantasy. They echo a world where survival itself was cyclical. The land teachers return. Your feet cross a mound where one city has been built upon the bones of another. Beneath the dust lies a floor. Beneath that floor, another floor. Beneath that, broken pottery, ash, brick, bone, reed matting, and the compacted remains of lives that once believed themselves present. Each layer was once the surface of the world. Each became depth. Civilization becomes archaeology while still thinking itself permanent. There is gentle comedy in that. If one is patient enough. A king boasts that his wall will endure forever. The wall collapses, becomes a foundation, and later supports someone else's kitchen. The kitchen falls, becomes soil, and then a scholar measures it with a clipboard and grave expression. Eternity has a dry sense of humour. Yet the pattern is not only comic, it is sacred and frightening. Creation gives way to destruction. Destruction prepares rebuilding. Rebuilding claims restoration, even when it creates something new. Mesopotamian rulers often describe themselves as restorers of temples, cities, canals, and divine order. Such claims appear in royal inscriptions across many periods. The act of rebuilding was not merely practical repair, it was presented as a return to right arrangement, a renewal of a structure older than the present crisis. To rebuild is to say the world can begin again, but it never begins innocently. The memory of flood stands at the centre of this rhythm. Water nourishes the field, then water can erase the field. It carries fertile silt, then carries away walls, animals, archives, and people. Flood in Mesopotamian tradition is not just disaster. It is the great boundary, the dark washing between ages. It divides royal time, human memory, and the fragile confidence that tomorrow will resemble today. A flood is the river reminding everyone who owns the plain. You stand beneath a sky, heavy with storm. The air smells metallic and damp. Reeds flatten under wind. The first drops strike dust and release that deep earthen scent that feels both comforting and ominous. Clouds gather like dark wool over the low horizon. The river, normally slow and brown, begins to swell with quiet strength. The plain listens. Then the water comes, not with a single cinematic wave, but with persistence. It fills channels, crosses banks, enters fields, surrounds mounds, and turns paths into shining uncertainty. A storage jar floats away with undignified grace. A goat protests from somewhere it should not be. Mud walls soften. Footsteps vanish. The world becomes reflective, unstable, and strangely beautiful. Beauty is not always horror. A quirky fringe tidbit often attaches itself to flood cycles. Some modern writers claim that Mesopotamian flood traditions preserve a memory of a single global catastrophe known to every ancient culture. Professional scholars are careful here. They study local flood experience, literary borrowing, mythic structure, and environmental memory without reducing everything to one event. Yet the recurring flood theme remains powerful because water disasters were real enough to market imagination deeply. The mythic flood may be many things: event, symbol, warning, and reset. The open scholarly debate concerns how Mesopotamian flood narratives relate to archaeology and environment. Researchers continue to ask whether these stories preserve memories of severe regional floods, ritualized myths of renewal, theological explanations of divine judgment, or literary traditions reshaped across languages and centuries. No responsible answer flattens the matter into one neat claim. The flood is too deep for that. You watch the water cover the plain and time seems to dissolve. The old cities are gone beneath reflection. The sky lies on the earth as broken silver. Birds settle on floating reeds. A temple mound rises like an island, its upper walls dark with rain. somewhere inside so the tablets may survive if the room stays dry. Elsewhere, tablets soften, signs blur, and memory returns to mud. The world forgets by water, then it remembers by clay. When the flood retreats, the cycle does not end. Mud remains, silt remains, loss remains. People return. If people remain to return, they salvage beams, rebuild walls, reopen channels, bury the dead, and recite what happened. A disaster becomes a story. A story becomes ritual memory. Ritual memory becomes part of the explanation for why the present world is not the first. That idea matters. The old tablet's hidden timeline is not a simple ladder from darkness to civilization. It is more like breathing. The world forms, breaks, forms again. Gods establish order. Order strains. Order collapses. Order is restored. Humans are created for work, yet their own works fall into ruin. Cities become sacred, then vulnerable. Kingship descends, moves, vanishes, returns. Everything sturdy is temporary. Everything temporary may leave a trace. This cyclical thinking changes the place of humanity. People are not the grand final result of a smooth upward march. They are participants in maintenance. They serve, build, repair, remember, and begin again after damage. Human greatness lies less in escaping cycles than in enduring them. A canal worker and a temple scribe both belong to this rhythm. One clears silt from water, the other clears damage from memory. Both are fighting return. Both will lose eventually. Both still matter. You walk across a field after floodwater has withdrawn. The mud pulls at your feet. Sunlight glitters in shallow pools. Dead reeds lie flattened, but new green shoots are already rising through them. A farmer might see labour. A priest might see renewal. A scribe might see a pattern worth preserving. The earth itself offers no interpretation. It only produces the next season. The ancient imagination listens to that silence and hears structures. Cycles older than empires do not depend on kings. Empires are brief flashes against them. Akkad rises and falls. Ur rises and falls. Babylon rises and falls. Assyria rises and falls. Later powers come with new languages. Armies, coins, roads, prayers, and paperwork. Beneath them all, water rises, mud dries, fields salt, walls crumble, names fade, and someone begins again. This is not despair. It is scale. A person living within such cycles may feel small, but not useless. Smallness can be a form of accuracy. You repair one bank, you copy one tablet, you teach one child a sign, you place one offering before a god. You cannot hold back time, but you can hold a line for a little while. Perhaps civilization itself is the art of holding lines. The sky clears after the imagined storm. Stars appear over pools left behind by the flood. Their reflections tremble when insects touch the surface. The air smells washed. They're not clean exactly. Oh, it smells of wet earth, broken stems, and beginnings that have not asked permission. In the distance, a mound darkens against the horizon, waiting for walls to rise again. The old cycle turns without hurry. Creation, destruction, flood, rebuilding, and forgetting are not separate chapters in the ancient world. They are one motion seen from different distances. The tablet preserves only a civer of it, but the civer is enough. It tells you that before humanity, order was already fragile. With humanity, order becomes remembered, repaired, and lost in more complicated ways. Perhaps that is why the ancient stories feel so enduring at night. They do not promise that anything lasts untouched. They suggest that meaning survives through return, through the repeated shaping of clay after water, through the rebuilding of the sacred house after collapse, through the copying of a damaged line by a tired hand in lamplight. The cycle turns. The tablet dries. The river waits. The scene narrows into a reading room filled with low light. Not the ancient archive now, but a modern place of careful silence, where scholars sit beneath lamps with tablets, photographs, sign lists, notebooks, and the quiet anxiety of translation. Outside, traffic moves through a living city. Inside, the old world waits on a table, grey-brown, cracked, and smaller than the argument surrounding it. You feel the hush of the room. A clay fragment rests on a padded support. Its surface catches the lamp in shallow ridges. One sign is clear, another is damaged. A third might be a divine name, or perhaps the surviving edge of something less dramatic. A scholar leans forward, not with theatrical revelation, but with patient suspicion. Ancient clay rewards patience more often than excitement. Excitement has terrible eyesight. The people gathered around the tablet do not all agree that is not failure, that is scholarship breathing. One sees a familiar phrase from a creation tradition, another notices that the grammar is awkward for such a restoration. A third asks whether the line belongs to a school exercise rather than a temple text. A fourth wonders if later copies have misled everyone by seeming cleaner than they are. The tablet says little. The room says much. Modern Assyriology depends on comparing thousands of tablets, fragments, copies, lexical lists, and archaeological contexts. Scholars at institutions such as Yale, Oxford, Chicago, Harvard, and the University of Pennsylvania have contributed to the reading of Sumerian and Akkadian texts across generations. This mainstream fact matters because no single clay object speaks alone. It is understood through a vast conversation of signs, parallels, grammar, excavation records, and caution. Caution is not dull. Caution is the lamp. A scholar turns a page. The paper makes a dry sound, like a reed scraping lightly against plaster. Another adjusts a photograph taken under angled light, because a sign may appear different when shadow falls from another direction. The tablet itself remains stubbornly modest. It does not care whether someone's article depends on it. Clay has survived too long to be impressed by footnotes. Still, every mark matters. The ancient question returns in a modern form. What can be claimed about the world before humanity? What did the Sumerians themselves imagine? What belongs to early Sumerian tradition? What belongs to later Mesopotamian retelling? And what belongs to modern desire pressing too hard on broken evidence? The answers do not sit neatly in separate boxes. They overlap, argue, and withdraw. You listen as the debate unfolds softly. One scholar emphasizes the environment. In a floodplain shaped by water, silt, and irrigation, myths of watery beginnings and divine labor reflect the conditions of life. Another emphasizes temple theology, arguing that stories of creation explain ritual service and the feeding of gods. Another studies political meaning, seeing in kingship, city origins, and divine decrees a map of authority. Another watches the language itself, because a single verb can change the world. That is not exaggeration. In ancient texts, a verb may decide whether a god creates, separates, assigns, fashions, or decrees. Each action has a different texture. To say humanity was made is not the same as saying humanity was appointed. To say the world was divided is not the same as saying it emerged. Translation is not a window opened once. It is a series of careful doors. Some doors stick. Some open onto walls. A quirky fringe tidbit enters the room only as a shadow. Popular books and late-night discussions often claim that Sumerian tablets plainly describe beings from the sky, creating humans as a labor force. Professional scholars reject the confidence of that reading, because it usually depends on selective translation, later speculation, and imaginative leaps. Yet the scholarly room does not laugh the whole topic away. It recognizes why the idea attracts attention. The ancient texts truly do speak about gods, labor, clay, creation, and a humanity born into service. The raw materials are there. The modern certainty is not that distinction matters deeply. A responsible reader can say that Mesopotamian creation traditions portray humans as made to serve divine needs. A responsible reader cannot then casually turn every god into a visitor from another planet. There is a difference between an ancient theological world and a modern theory wearing ancient clothing. The clay deserves better tailoring. A small smile passes around the table. Someone has seen that kind of tailoring before. The open scholarly debate grows richer when the researchers discuss genre. Is the text myth, ritual, theology, political memory, scribal exercise, or learned speculation? The answer may be yes in several directions at once. Ancient categories do not behave like modern library shelves. A myth could teach ritual order. A school tablet could preserve sacred poetry. A royal inscription could be propaganda and devotion together. The past is inconveniently complete. It refuses to be only one thing. You sit in the reading room as evening thickens against the windows. The lamps form small golden circles. Beyond them, shelves hold dictionaries, sign catalogues, excavation reports, editions of texts, and photographs of objects scattered across museums. Each book represents years of labour by people who chose slow uncertainty over easy certainty. That choice has its own dignity. It is a quieter kind of courage. A tablet from one side may preserve a line about divine work, a fragment from another may preserve a parallel phrase. A later copy may clarify a damaged passage, yet also introduce a new theological emphasis. A bilingual version may help with meaning, but it may also reflect a different age's understanding. The scholar must weigh every piece without letting any one piece become king too soon. Evidence must be governed carefully. This is where the story becomes almost personal. You want the lost tablet to speak plainly. You want it to describe the world before humanity in full, with a beginning, a system, a reason, and perhaps one beautifully unsettling final sentence. But real ancient evidence often gives something more demanding. It gives partial knowledge, it gives enough to awaken wonder, and not enough to end inquiry. That is why the room remains lit. The scholars argue, but not as enemies. They argue as people standing around a well, each lowering a different vessel into darkness. One brings up grammar, one brings up archaeology, one brings up comparative mythology, one brings up social history, one brings up ritual context. The water they draw is not identical, yet it comes from the same deep need to understand. A tablet lies between them like a sleeping animal. It is small enough to hold, it is large enough to resist them all. It is it's not only about ancient words, it is about modern restraint. How far may imagination go before it becomes invention? How much uncertainty should be admitted without draining the story of life? How does one speak of myth respectfully without pretending it is literal history? How does one speak of history vividly without flattening myth into decoration? These questions have no simple ending. They are the true lowlight of scholarship. You notice the hands around the table. Some are young, turning pages quickly. Some are older, marked by years of notes, lectures, excavation reports, and arguments politely resumed at conferences. They belong to people who know that a lost line may never return. They know that an elegant theory may fall because one new fragment changes the reading. They know that humility is not weakness before the past. Humility is accuracy. The clay fragment waits beneath the lamp. Its broken edge casts a tiny shadow. That shadow seems to contain the whole trouble of ancient history. The world before humanity may have been imagined as watery, ordered, divine, layered, burdened, and waiting. That much can be said with care, but the exact shape of every belief, the earliest form of every story, the original intention of every scribe, remain partly beyond reach. Perhaps they should. A past fully captured would become too small. The reading room grows still. One scholar closes a book, another writes a note in the margin. The tablet is covered again, not hidden from truth, but protected from the air, the light, and the enthusiastic certainty of human beings. Outside, modern night settles over streets, windows, and electric signs. Inside, the ancient argument remains open. The scholars leave quietly. The clay keeps its silence. And in that silence, the lost world remains scholarly, secret, and unfinished. Your attention returns to the strange lateness of humanity. The world has depth before you. It has rivers before you. It has divine order, sacred cities, hidden waters, restless lepin, and numbers that gather like lamps in the dark. When the human creature finally appears, it does not arrive at the beginning of the stage. It steps into a drama already crowded with forces older than its own breath. That is the unsettling grace of the old story. Humanity arrives late, but not useless. You stand on the edge of a field where the first dawn of human work is beginning. The soil is damp from the river's retreat. Reeds grow along a channel that still needs shaping. Birds move through pale mist. The air smells of wet earth, crushed stems, and smoke from a small fire that someone has just learned to keep alive. A hand lifts a basket. Another hand presses clay around a crack in a wall. Another gathers grain. The world receives hands. These two hands. It does not applaud. Ancient Mesopotamian literature often presents human beings as created to serve the gods, especially through labour and offerings. Scholars at institutions such as Oxford, Yale, and Chicago have studied this theme as a central feature of Mesopotamian theology and social imagination. This mainstream fact matters because it places human purpose inside a system of service, not modern individual destiny. The human is meaningful because the human maintains connections. That is not how most people prefer their origin stories. We tend to enjoy being the point. The Sumerian and wider Mesopotamian imagination is less flattering and more mature. It allows humanity to be necessary without being first. It gives people a role within cosmic maintenance. Humans feed the gods through offerings, build their houses, cultivate their fields, sing their hymns, preserve their names, and keep the sacred order visible through repeated action. A fragile creature becomes a keeper. There is dignity in that. Yet the dignity is complicated. To be made for service can feel like a burden placed before consent. The first human does not negotiate terms. No one offers a polite schedule, a rest day, or a reasonable complaint department. The clay body rises, breath enters, and the world immediately presents its requirements: field, canal, temple, offering, name, memory. Human life begins as obligation. It also begins as relationship. In the ancient temple economy, offerings were not merely gifts tossed upward into mystery. They were structured acts, repeated daily and seasonally, binding city and deity through food, scent, music, purity, and attention. Such rituals reflected the belief that gods inhabited their divine houses and required care from human communities. The task may seem rudimentary to modern ears, but within that world it made profound sense. The sacred relationship had to be maintained. You can feel the rhythm of it. A priest enters a shrine before sunrise. His steps are soft on the floor. A lamp trembles in the darkness. Bread is arranged. Beer is poured. Dates are set out, water is offered, words are spoken in the correct order, because sacred order is not improved by improvisation from a sleepy assistant. The god receives attention, and the city receives continuity. This is humanity's late arrival becoming daily work. The quirky fringe tidbit at this point is tempting and familiar. Some modern interpreters say that humans being created as workers proves that ancient texts preserve the memory of a manufactured servant species. Professional historians do not accept that leap, yet the discomfort that gives rise to it is real. The myth does imagine humanity as created for labour. It really does place service near the beginning of human identity. The question is, what kind of service? Not factory service, sacred service. Still, the edge remains sharp. The old story asks whether humans are central, useful, beloved, replaceable, or all of these in different ways. A creature made from clay can be humble. A creature animated through divine involvement can be precious. A creature assigned labour can be subordinate. A creature able to pray, sing, and remember can be intimate with the divine order. The human being is a contradiction with fingers. That is one reason the myth endures. You walk through the forming settlement as morning warms the walls. Someone repairs a canal edge with a wooden tool. Someone shapes a brick and leaves it to dry. Someone grinds grain with a steady circular movement that echoes the turning seasons. A child watches the adults, absorbing tasks before understanding theology. This is how purpose becomes ordinary. It is taught through motion. No one explains the cosmos every morning. They just work in. Hide it. The open scholarly debate grows more humane here. Researchers continue to discuss whether Mesopotamian creation myths primarily justify labour hierarchies, express a theological dependence between gods and humans, reflect temple economic systems, or explore the universal problem of work and mortality. Each approach touches part of the truth. The clay human stands where social history and sacred imagination meet. You can read the myth from above as theology. You can read it from below as labour. Both readings breathe. The fields show why. Irrigation agriculture demands coordination, timing, and discipline. A single farmer cannot easily manage the larger system alone. Canals require shared effort. Fields require measurement. Harvests require storage. Temples require supplies. The city requires food, and food requires bodies. Human purpose becomes woven into collective survival long before anyone writes philosophy about community. The first worker is never only himself. He belongs to a system, but ancient people were not machines. They loved, mourned, feasted, joked, feared debt, envied neighbours, and probably avoided unpleasant tasks when possible. The myth of human service does not erase those ordinary lives. It gives them a cosmic background. Grinding grain, carrying water, cleaning a shrine, or recording barley can all belong to the grand maintenance of the world. That is a surprisingly tender thought. Small tasks become part of the oldest orders. You pause at the edge of a temple courtyard. Sunlight falls across fresh plaster. A woman sets down a basket. A man carries jars toward a storage room. A scribe marks quantities on clay with practiced indifference. Somewhere inside, a hymn begins in a low voice. The city is awake, and it's waking as ritual as much as economy. Why did humanity arrive so late? Perhaps because the world first had to become a place where human action mattered. There had to be water to guide, earth to shape, gods to serve, names to remember, and an order that could be maintained by fragile hands. A human created too early would stand in unmeasured darkness, without task, relation, or threshold. Lateness gives humanity context. That may be the gentlest interpretation. A harsher one remains. Perhaps humans arrived when other beings grew tired. Perhaps human creation is the cosmic answer to exhaustion. The divine workers laid down their baskets, and clay received their burden. In that vision, human life begins under transferred weight. The ache in the back of a labourer is not accidental. It is part of the first arrangement. The old story holds both possibilities without apology. Service can be sacred. Service can be heavy. You look at your own hands in the imagined light. They are not divine hands. They are not ancient hands, yet they belong to the same long inheritance of making, repairing, carrying, writing, feeding, remembering, and beginning again. The tablets world before humanity becomes meaningful because humanity enters it not as owner, but as participant. That is a smaller title. It may also be a wiser one. The river continues beyond the field. The temple wall warms in the sun. The clay dries into brick, tablet, and body. Perhaps humanity is late, because the universe did not need an audience first. It needed care. It needed witnesses who could labour. It needed creatures humble enough to kneel in mud and strange enough to ask what the mud remembered. In that strange mixture, the human role becomes both practical and mysterious. You are not first in the story. You are not outside it either. The translation ends, and the silence becomes larger than the words. You sit with the tablet under a low, steady light, watching the final line settle into English. The sentence seems plain at first. A god acts, a place is named, a decree is given, a human role is implied, but not fully explained. The marks on clay have crossed thousands of years into modern speech, and still something remains behind them, untouched. Translation brings the voice near. It also proves how far away the voice remains. The ancient signs do not arrive carrying their full weather. They have lost the room where they were read, the accent of the reader, the mood of the ritual, the political worry behind the copying, the tired hand of the student, and the local pride of the temple. They reach you as meaning, but meaning stripped of breath. The words survive, while the world around them flickers. That is the scholar's quiet wound. Sumerian is the earliest known written language from southern Mesopotamia, preserved through cuneiform tablets and studied through long comparison of signs, grammar, bilingual texts, and later scholarly traditions. Researchers at universities such as Oxford, Yale, Chicago, and Pennsylvania have helped build the modern understanding of its literature. That mainstream fact matters because every translation is not a single act of looking. It's the result of generations standing shoulder to shoulder before clay. No one reads alone. Even solitude has footnotes. A translator examines the tablet and considers the sign before him. It may have several possible values. It may function differently depending on context. It may appear in a damaged phrase, beside a divine name, or within a formula whose parallels are scattered across other tablets. The translator chooses carefully, knowing that every choice creates a path through the ancient dark. The path is useful. It is not the whole desert. You hear the soft scratch of pencil against paper. A lamp hums faintly. Outside, modern rain taps on a window, which feels almost too appropriate for a civilization born under the anxiety of water. The translator writes one word, pauses, then crosses it out. Another word takes its place, and it's more accurate, perhaps less beautiful. Accuracy and beauty are polite rivals in ancient translation. Sometimes they cooperate. Often they glare. The tablet's meaning grows quieter because each modern word reveals a loss. When you read gods, you receive a familiar English word, but the ancient divine world does not fit neatly inside it. When you read servant, worker, human, deep, heaven, earth, or creation, each term carries modern echoes that may not belong fully to the original thought. The translation opens the gate, but you enter wearing your own shoes. Those shoes leave a print. A quirky fringe tidbit lives in this fragile space. Some popular writers claim that mainstream translators hide the plain meaning of Sumerian tablets, as if museums and universities are collectively guarding a cosmic secret behind locked grammar books. The claim is dramatic, which makes it travel well. Yet real translation is usually less like conspiracy and more like careful disagreement over damaged signs. The drama is not hidden censorship. The drama is uncertainty, and uncertainty is dramatic enough. You look again at the translated line. It says that something existed before humans, or that humans were formed for service, or that divine powers arranged the world before human memory began. The statement is powerful, CEO, but not simple. It belongs to a genre, a tradition, a scribal environment, and a world view. If you pull it out too quickly, it becomes a slogan. If you let it breathe, it becomes a doorway. The doorway is narrow. It still opens. The open, scholarly debate surrounds nearly every layer of this reading. Specialists ask how ancient audiences understood mythic time, whether creation passages reflected ritual performance, how later copies shaped earlier material, and how much social reality can be drawn from sacred narrative. Some emphasize language, some emphasize archaeology, some emphasize comparative religion. Each approach lights part of the tablet, but each leaves shadows. This is not failure. It is honesty before depth. You imagine the original scribe hearing the text in his own language. The sounds do not resemble your modern voice. They move with a rhythm learned by repetition, perhaps chanted, perhaps recited, perhaps copied silently while the mind supplied the older cadence. The words carried associations from hymns, city cults, god lists, school training, and ritual phrases. One sign could open a corridor of memory for him that remains closed to you. That is why translation can feel lonely. You receive the sentence, but not every echo. Still, the effort matters. Without translation, the tablet remains mute to most of the world. With translation, it speaks imperfectly, and imperfect speech is better than perfect silence. The translator is not stealing the ancient voice. He is making a place where it can be heard, and even if the sound is faint, cracked, and surrounded by cautions. A clay text is like a distant bell. You hear the tone. You do not see the hand that struck it. The silence after translation is therefore not empty disappointment. It is the space where reverence should begin. You have learned something real, but not everything. You have touched an ancient idea, but not possessed it. You have glimpsed a world before humanity as imagined by people who lived in river cities of clay, labour, gods, and fragile memory. The glimpse is enough to change the room. The tablet seems smaller now. It also seems deeper. A museum visitor might pass it quickly, reading the label and moving onward toward brighter objects. That is understandable. Gold has excellent manners under display lights. Clay asks for more patience. It does not shine at once. It waits until the mind slows down enough to notice that these small marks are among the oldest surviving attempts to think beyond the human present. That is not a minor achievement. It is almost unbearable. The translation tells you that ancient people wondered about a world before their own kind. They imagined powers arranging reality, waters moving beneath creation, cities carrying sacred identity, humans shaped for work, a memory broken by flood, time, and copying. They did not think of themselves as the first thought of the universe. They thought backward into depths that humbled them. Modern people could use that practice. Gently, of course. No one enjoys being humbled too early in the evening. You place the translation beside the tablet in your mind. One is smooth, printed, readable, and deceptively confident. The other is rough, damaged, silent, and closer to the first hand. Between them lies the true story, not fully in either one, meaning lives in the crossing. It travels from clay to sign, and from sign to sound, but from sound to thought, from thought to modern language, losing and gaining something at every step. Nothing arrives unchanged, not even ancient truth. A faint smell of dust and paper fill the room. The lamplight pulls over the desk. The translated page rests quietly, and the tablet remains unreadable to the eye that has not been trained. Yet both seem to look back at you. They ask for patience, and they ask for restraint. They ask you not to flatten mystery into certainty, and not to abandon wonder, because certainty is difficult. That balance is the hidden discipline. Perhaps the lost tablet describing the world before humanity is not lost only because a physical object is missing. Perhaps it is lost because the full world of its meaning cannot return. The marsh light, the temple sound, the scribe's breath, the divine names in their living force, the first listeners who knew what the silences implied, all of these have gone into darkness. But not completely. A trace remains. The silence after translation is where that trace can be felt most clearly, not in loud claims, not in tidy conclusions, not in the proud announcement that the mystery has been solved. It is felt in the pause after the final word, when you understand that the ancient text has spoken and still has kept something back. The clay has given you a sentence. The past has kept its breath. The tablet rests again in darkness, and the story refuses to close. Not because nothing has been learned, much has been gathered from clay, water, temple dust, broken signs, and the patient arguments of those who read them. Yet the old world remains larger than its surviving words. It keeps the final answer just beyond reach, like a lamp seen through reeds on the far side of a marsh. You stand before the tablet one last time. The museum room is quiet. The glass case reflects only dim shapes. Beyond the walls, the modern city continues with its lights, traffic, elevators, messages, and restless human noise. But the clay does not belong to that hurry. It belongs to the long tempo of rivers, buried rooms, collapsed walls, and scribes who press small marks into wet earth without knowing they were sending them into another age. The tablet is small enough to overlook. That may be its greatest disguise. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets preserved some of the earliest known written traditions in human history, including myths, hymns, administrative records, and royal lists. Research from universities such as Oxford, Yale, Chicago, and Pennsylvania has shown that these texts allow modern readers to glimpse how early urban societies imagined gods, labour, kingship, creation, and memory. That mainstream fact matters because the tablet's mystery does not float outside history, it grows from real cities. Real scribes, real temples, and real clay. The unsettling part is not that the ancients wrote myths. The unsettling part is what those myths make possible. They imagine a world before human beings. They imagine order before human breath, work before human hands, water before names, and sacred places before crowds. They allow humanity to be late, useful, fragile, and strangely honoured. They do not place people at the first instant of existence. They place people within an older system, already layered with powers and tasks. That is a quiet kind of humility. You look at the wedges and feel how little space they occupy. Each mark is only a pressure in clay, yet together they hold divine counsels. Deep waters, city origins, flood memories, strange sages, kings whose reigns stretch beyond ordinary belief, and the aching question of why humanity was shaped at all. The tablet is a landscape folded into a palm-sized object. A quirky fringed tidbit still lingers in the shadows. Some modern readers insist the lost Sumerian tablet must contain a literal record of pre-human rulers, visitors from the heavens, or a forgotten civilization older than accepted history. Professional historians do not treat those claims as established fact, yet the fascination itself reveals something true. The ancient texts do make humanity feel like a late arrival inside a vast and mysterious order. That feeling is not invented. Only some conclusions are The open scholarly debate remains gentle but unresolved. Researchers continue to discuss how these ancient traditions should be understood, whether as theology, political memory, ritual instruction, social reflection, environmental imagination, or inherited poetry reshaped by scribes. The strongest answer may be that they are many things at once. The ancient world did not divide meaning as sharply as modern readers often do. A myth could be sacred and practical. A tablet could be ordinary and immense. A line about clay could speak about bodies, labour, mortality, and writing at the same time. A flood could be water, memory, disaster, boundary and renewal. A city could be bricks and also destiny. A god could be a force of nature, a royal patron, a divine personality, and a way of understanding the pressure of life. This is why the old story does not end cleanly. It keeps widening. You imagine the tablet before it was broken. Perhaps it lay on a shelf in a temple archive. Perhaps it was copied by a student whose mind wandered toward dinner. Perhaps it was part of a learned tradition older than the scribe himself. Perhaps its missing lines once made the story clearer. Perhaps they only made the mystery more graceful. No one can restore every lost breath. That is part of the truth. The world before humanity, as seen through this ancient memory, is not a simple place. It is not a blank emptiness waiting for the people to become important. It is already full of powers, waters, boundaries, burdens, and sacred designs. Humanity enters not as the owner of all meaning, but as a participant in a drama already underway. And yet participation is not small. To carry water, to shape brick, to sing a hymn, to copy a tablet, to bury the dead, to remember a name, to ask what existed before all human asking. These are not meaningless acts. They are the fragile ways human beings hold their place between earth and sky. The old tablet seems to understand this better than many polished monuments. Clay has a humble intelligence. It knows pressure. It knows breakage. It knows endurance. The museum light fades in your imagination. The tablet becomes only a dark shape behind glass. Still, the signs remain. They do not shout. They never did. They wait with the patience of things that have survived longer than the nations that once held them, longer than the voices that first read them, longer than the hands that pressed them into being. Perhaps that is the final softness of the mystery. The story of the world before humanity may never be recovered fully, because it was never meant to become a modern answer. It was a sacred memory, a poetic structure, a social mirror, and a way of placing human life within an order too old to command. It told people that they were made of clay, but not only clay. It told them they served, but also remembered. It told them they arrived late, but still mattered. Now the room grows still. You let the ancient plain return one last time. There is river mist near the reeds. There is cool mud under a darkening sky. There are no hurried voices, no bright screens, no modern questions demanding instant reply. There is only water moving through the old land, carrying silt from mountains no scribe has seen. The stars appear slowly. They do not explain themselves. The temple mound rests in the distance, its outline soft against the evening. Somewhere beneath it, the deep water of imagination continues to breathe. Somewhere above it, heaven keeps its measured silence. Between them, humanity passes like a small lamp, bright for a moment, then sheltered by memory. You do not need to solve the tablet tonight. You only need to let it remain. Let the clay be clay. Let the missing lines stay open. Let the old scribes keep part of their world beyond your reach. There is peace in not forcing every shadow to become a fact. There is rest in knowing that history is not a locked chest, but a shore where fragments wash up under moonlight. The river moves softly. The reeds lean and rise again. The ancient tablet rests in its darkness, holding a world before humanity, a world within humanity, and a world still unfinished. Perhaps the first story was never meant to close with certainty. Perhaps it was meant to leave you listening, calm and small beneath the old sky. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. Now the night folds itself around you. Slowly and without demand, the museum room dissolves. The glass case fades. The clay tablet becomes a warm, dark pebble of memory. Resting somewhere beyond sight, your breathing settles into the rhythm of a quiet river moving through reeds, steady, unhurried, and older than speech. The ancient cities grow distant. Their walls sink back into soft earth. Their temple lamps dim without fear. Their scribes lay down their reeds and let the damp tablets dry in peace. Nothing more needs to be counted now. No offering must be carried. No broken line must be repaired before morning. You are allowed to leave the mystery unfinished. Let the waters before names remain wide. Let the sky and earth keep their distance. Let the first human footprint rest in cool clay. Without asking where the road finally ends, the past has given enough for one night. It has opened its door, shed its dust, and closed the room gently behind you. Sleep can come like river mist. It rises without hurry, covering the fields, the reeds, the temple steps, and the old marks pressed into clay. Every question grows softer inside it. Every ancient name becomes a low sound underwater. And far away, in the dark before memory, the world waits quietly as a not empty, not explained, but calm. Good night.